Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back. Welcome back to another episode of the Hot Mic Podcast. The Hot Mic Podcast is where divergent points of view debate and discuss hot topics. I'm Nate the Barbarian, your humble host, and as always, I am not alone. Today, we're joined by or with Tarris Horton. How you doing, Tarris?
Doing
Good to
well,
see you,
guys.
bro.
How are you guys? Good to be here.
And good to see you, bro. And Raven Mundy. How you doing, Raven?
Good, good.
Good to see you. And Kevin Aldridge. How you doing, Kevin?
Doing good. It's cold out there, bro.
It
Cold
is.
out.
It is. And Phil Heimlich, aka Sexy Phil. How you doing, Sexy Phil?
I'm doing fine, my friend. Thank you.
As you can see, I'm kind of stuck on that just for a little while. I
Yeah.
won't harp on it too much.
Well,
Well,
it
there is.
could help. It could help my reputation in some quarters. Let's just leave it at that.
We'll leave it like that. There is so much going on, and that is not an understatement. And we cannot possibly get to all of the hot topics on just one episode, but we're going to try. And I suspect there'll probably be some things we'll talk about today that may not be on your radar screen, but I think they may have some relevant themes nonetheless. So let's just jump straight into it. We really appreciate you. Let me put the chat up and say what's up to Brenda. Brenda writes, "Good afternoon, Nathan and crew. Good to see you." Shahira, how you doing, Shahira? She writes, "Thank goodness for Facebook alerts. I forgot to check for this again." Good afternoon, everybody, and glad to see you. Glad to see you. If you have comments and questions, put it in the chat. I'll leave it up for most of the show so that anybody who sees this video can see it. And then, as much as I can, we'll try to highlight and kind of bring those questions and comments to the attention of the crew. Jason is in the house. How you doing, Jason? Good to see you, bro. Let's get straight into it. Hold on, give me 1 second here because I need to pull a picture up before we get started. Won't take but a second here. But I want to start with two stories that have local implications. And I want to talk about this little girl right here. Again, this may or may not be on your radar screen. This little girl's name is Adeline, to my understanding. She's 12 years old, and she needs a heart transplant. She has currently been receiving treatment from Cincinnati Children's Hospital, but there's a little bit of a problem. She needs a transplant, and per the policy of Children's Hospital for all transplant, donors must receive the COVID vaccine. Now, her parents, and she is adopted, her parents have religious views that restrict them from getting vaccines. They are against this for various reasons, not the least of which is their religious beliefs. And they have been appealing to hospital
If I
officials.
could just interrupt a second, Nathan,
Yeah,
I think that again in reading about this, that they say because of our religious, I mean, they appear to be what I call evangelical Christians, and as opposed to Christian Science or something, if I'm wrong, and they were not very specific about what spiritual principle they're relying on. There's certainly, as far as I know, if they're what I call Christians born again, there's certainly nothing in the Bible, Old or New Testament, that would suggest that one who is, say, a Christ follower shouldn't have a vaccine. So I'm not so sure what religious belief they're standing on.
okay. Well, let me finish the intro here, and then we'll get straight to it because I think that is definitely fair on some levels. But the mother, her name is Janine Deal. She's the mother of 12. They are from Indiana. They actually adopted Adeline when she was 4 years old. They knew of her two heart conditions and were told when they adopted her that it may come to this where she may need a heart transplant. From reading various stories, it looks like this is, and there's no reason to doubt it, a very serious life or death situation. If this young girl does not receive a transplant, she will most likely not be with us. Here's some more to the story. She's actually a relative of Vice President J.D. Vance. So I'm not sure how that's going to play into the politics. Some people are calling her a hero, this family a hero for standing on their principles. Some are saying that she is a bad mom. But I want to get your thoughts about this situation. Is this woman a hero for standing on principle, or is she a bad mom?
Well, I think anybody who tries to sort of simplify this too much can kind of be in some dangerous territory. You know, as someone who is a person of faith, who believe that, people's religious convictions, their spiritual journey is just that, it's theirs. Um, no one can tell you or try to tell you what your religious relationship should be with your God or whatever higher power it is that you believe in, even if it's not what I believe in. And so I think you have to tread lightly when you start, talking about those sorts of things. I also think you have to tread lightly when you want to start blaming Children's Hospital or saying that they're the villains in this because they have to operate on what is good science, what is proven science, and what they believe will give the transplant recipient the best opportunity um, for survival. They owe that not just to the patient, but they owe it to the person who donated, the organs. I think any of us, if you are an organ donor or so forth and so on, you want to make sure that that's that donation that you're making, that sacrifice that you're making, is actually going to go to someone who is going to be able to survive, thanks to your contribution. And so I think, Children's owes it to the donor as well as the recipient to give them the best chance, for success there. Obviously, the JD Vance element, and I think this, the relations are stretched at best. I mean, I guess you could say that they're still family, but there's a lot of, the cousin or the in-laws, brother, sister type situation when you start to get into what is the actual direct connection to JD Vance. There are several layers to that in terms of the relationship there. But of course, you're going to interject the politics into that, and folks are going to try to make this a political thing, and I think that's a mistake. I think that's a mistake to do that. Certainly, this family has the right to their religious convictions, whatever that may be. But Children's Hospital also has an obligation from a science standpoint of what they have to do and what they know is actually the best scientific practices to make sure that both the recipient and the donor are honored in that medical process. So, it's complex, and people are going to second guess the family and that sort of situation and say she's a bad mother or that the family is making a mistake. Um, Unfortunately,
should Children's Hospital make an exception in their donor policy?
I don't think so. I don't think so because this is, Children's Hospital they have to make their decisions based on medical science, not spiritual and religious. I mean, I think, again, I think that's dangerous ground for, any type of medical profession to start to operate into the realm of spirituality. I mean, as someone who goes and visits the sick in the hospital and who prays for people, I certainly understand that there's an element there, but those who are in the medical profession cannot operate, under the same pretext that those of us who practice in the spiritual realm do. I certainly hope my doctor is a religious and spiritual person and has those beliefs, but I also want to know, that they've studied the science, that they've studied the medicine and the biology, because that's what we rely on when we go to those places to seek treatment. So absolutely, Children's Hospital has their requirements for a reason, and I think they need to stick to it.
I have a few different points to make. Most of them come from what I just heard Kevin say. Just a few things. Number one, just a question: would anybody care about this young lady's life if she didn't have some mild connection to JD Vance? Would this even be a story that is, whether it did or did not come across people's, timeline or whatever the case may be? Would it even be a story if she didn't have some very small connection to a JD Vance? That's my first question. Not to be, not to make light of it or diminish it because it's a heartbreaking story. But I don't think that people would care because people die due to hospital rules and regulations all the time. There are people who have had to face death because they couldn't afford a life-saving surgery because insurance wouldn't cover it. And so I feel like when we're having this conversation, we have to keep in mind that, because, and I only say this because Kevin said that, they have to make decisions based on the science and they have to do what they think is best for the patient. Eh, not really. They typically make, decisions based on what is policy. You can argue that those policies are based on what they believe to be best for the patient. But if we really gonna talk about it, we have to also include the fact that a lot of times it ain't policy. Sometimes it's money. Sometimes it's what the surgeon is or is not comfortable with doing on a personal level, what they have their confidence in their skills. It ain't always just because it's what they think is best for the patient. So I just wanted to put that out there. And then another thought that occurred to me is that I think that when people say things like, I believe in this, this is my religious belief, this is what I, believe religiously, I would say that the non religious don't always truly grasp that concept, because if you have relationship with God, you also understand that sometimes God calls you to do things that are not specifically spelled out in that gospel book. Sometimes God comes to you directly and tells you things about how he would like for you to live your life that won't be spelled out in that gospel book. And so if I have had conversations with God, if I've prayed and I have communed with my father and he has told me, daughter, I don't believe that this is for you, or daughter, I believe that this is for you, there's no way for me to prove that to you other than me relaying the conversations and the prayers that I've had between me and my God. And so saying something like, well, religious beliefs, how can you really quantify how important that is? You can't. That's between me and God, and that's the entire point. If I believe in the things that I've spoken to and had conversations with about the higher being, the higher power that I commune with, it's not up for debate. It's how I feel. And so to judge her mothering or to judge her parenthood based on what you believe her beliefs should be and should entail, it's misguided. You cannot dictate somebody else's belief system and the conversations that they have with their higher power. And so if she believes that her higher power has instructed her and her family not to take part with vaccines, that's just what that is. There can be no argument with that, whether it's right or wrong or moral, because in her eyes, with her relationship with the God that she serves, it is moral. It is the utmost moral thing she can do because she's being obedient to her God. So in order to, you can call her parenthood into question if you want to. If you're somebody who doesn't, really believe all that much in being, righteous or whatever you want to call it. If you're somebody who can kind of push aside your religious beliefs in order to, do what is convenient or what is comfortable for you, then you're going to think that she's a bad mom. You're going to think that her parenting is flawed. But for somebody who respects the God they serve, your God comes first before all of this. And so if my God has told me I don't do vaccines, my family don't do vaccines, my child will not do vaccines, that's just what it is. You got to respect it. If you can respect the fact that people have the right to discipline their child the way they want to teach their child what they want to dress their child the way they want to, you have to respect. I am also entitled and empowered to instill the religious beliefs that I carry for myself into my child in that same way. I don't want nobody telling me I can't raise my child to love God or to have reverence for God the way that I want them to, because that's the instruction I got from God himself. So I think that it's it depends on where you're coming from. It depends on your perspective. As somebody who I live a life of doing exactly what God told me to do, I have to respect her beliefs. God ain't never told me necessarily that I don't need a vaccine. And truth be told, if it weren't for the employment situation that I was previously in, I probably wouldn't have gotten it myself. But that ain't had nothing to do with my religious beliefs. It had everything to do with um how I felt about how the vaccine was being weaponized. I didn't like how it was being forced on people against their will. And so for me it was a moral thing, but it didn't have nothing to do with my spirituality, so to speak. But I was able to push that aside because again, it wasn't attached to my spirituality. It was either I get this vaccine or I lose my job. And so I made a decision that was best for me at that time. But if God had said to me, "You're not getting this vaccine," I'd have been out of a job sooner than I found myself. And I'm just leaving it at that.
Should
Just
just
to,
say Children's Hospital make an exception in their donor policy in this case?
I again, I understand everything that Kevin said. They have to do what they think is best. They have to give the patient, the best possible outcome. But I do think that I personally do believe that there should be an exception because we are operating off of an educated guess, not a guarantee. And so even like we were doing this surgery before people were unless it's something new, the surgery was already happening before COVID and the COVID vaccine existed. So what's the difference?
Well, I think the difference is that and it's not even just the COVID vaccination. It's several vaccinations. I think from the reporting that they're saying that she needed to have, and this is basically when you have that type of of uh, uh, surgery or procedure done, you have to take these anti-rejection medications, which, from my understanding, increase your susceptibility to other types of infections and diseases, which require you to have vaccinations. Again, and this is where I say, like, you gotta listen to the science. Where, again, as a person of faith, I think that's one area, but in the type of society that we live in, where there's so many different faiths and religious beliefs, I don't think our medical institutions can afford to operate under those assumptions. They have to operate off of the medicine and the science. Now, those of us who ascribe to faith, you subscribe to your faith, as Raven said. I mean, look, we got to remind ourselves that the Bible is rife with stories of people who God gave commandments to that it didn't make sense to the rest of the folks. Noah, if you believe in that, building an ark, when there's no water around, when there's no
There's
rain,
a drought, yeah.
I'm sure people would have looked at Noah and said, this dude is crazy. You know what I'm saying? And there are many other stories in the Bible when God asked Abraham to sacrifice his son. So the Bible is rife with stories of God talking to his people and giving directives and messages that may not jibe with what the world sees. And if you have that relationship and you believe this is what God is communicating with you, who am I to tell you that you are crazy? Right? That's why I said, faith is a personal journey. It's an individual thing, and everybody's got to go to their grave with what they believe at the end of the day. And that's really what it comes down to. So that's why I'm saying it's a complex situation where, if you really want to give respect to all sides considered, you got to kind of say it's not so cut and dry. If you're not a believer in the scriptures and the Bible and all of that, it's going to be clear to you that she's a bad mom. If you are a devout believer, but you don't necessarily agree with her beliefs on, the vaccine. Look, this is why we have so many different religious denominations, even within the realm of Christianity, because even Christians don't believe all of the same thing. Okay, so there are a lot of divergences in terms of what we believe in our faith, and that's why I say it basically comes down to an individual choice.
And I agree with that point. And now that I know that it's not just the COVID vaccine, I do have to kind of say that I think that it's unfortunate, but I don't think that they should have to make an exception on their policy. I think that if you are going to stand in that belief, you have to fully stand in it, no matter what that comes with, because that is also kind of the point of it all, ain't it? That's kind of the whole point of faith. You stand on that belief, no matter what is the consequence of standing in that belief. And so, if you are up against an institution that does not share your belief, you have to expect that they're not going to bend or make exceptions for you in your faith. You have to deal with the consequences of that. And so if they are truly uh um if they are truly under the understanding that vaccines are just never going to be for them, it's against their faith, then it's unfortunate, but they have to make that hard decision to just not go through with the surgery and deal with her ailment the best way they can. It's unfortunate, but you have to kind of, like I said, when you stand on that kind of a belief, you have to be prepared for the consequences that come with it.
Phil, Tarris, what's your thoughts? Oh, 1 second.
Unmute.
There he is.
I'm muted, or
no, he's unmuted. He's unmuted. You go right ahead, Phil.
There's a lot of people who walk into a post office and kill everyone in there and says, "Oh, God told me to do it." So I don't think that in and of itself, especially because at least within the Old Testament and New, there's nothing that I can think of that would suggest that this is a correct, at least from a biblical point of view. But I'll tell you, I am so sick of the way medicine has become politicized, especially the whole COVID thing. It's become like a right-wing conspiracy thing. Oh, the COVID, you don't want to get a COVID shot, despite overwhelming medical evidence in support of it. And even though I know a lot of people like this, like these folks. I mean, I could name a bunch of my friends, wonderful people, godly people. A bunch of my friends have adopted kids from China and so forth. And interestingly enough, a number of my well-educated, wise people I respect refused to get COVID shots, and a couple of them got really sick. And I think the reason is because somehow I think people who listen to kind of the Rush Limbaugh, Newsmax, all that stuff, and that is their sole source of information, naturally all they hear is bad stuff about COVID. And that's what it sounds like to me is happening here, rather than God told me. And let's keep one other thing in mind. This woman is not making the decision for herself. She's making it for her kid, who's what, 12 years old? It's one thing to say, oh, okay, I'm going to die. I got this belief, however unfounded it is. But to say, I'm going to let my kid die because I have this belief which is not supported by medical science, yeah, I don't think so.
Is it her biological child?
She's adopted.
That's where I kind of, because that's where I lose the whole story of it. Because I know what I would do for my biological child, and I just know what I would do for my biological child. And just when COVID happened, and I had a choice to take the vaccine or not take the vaccine, and my choice was strictly on my son's playing sports. And I knew that if I didn't get vaccinated, there was a chance that I wouldn't be able to be admitted into their games when they were playing sports. Whether they got vaccinated or not was on them. But for me, I took the chance. I took it, and I said, I'm gonna get this vaccination, and because I just didn't want to be bothered with it, whether I still will or not. So I would probably, I don't know. That's a tough one, man. It's real tough.
Yeah, I think
to me, it's real easy. To me, this is a real easy thing. I think everybody said stuff that I can kind of jive with, but let me start by saying this. I really respect people that adopt children. I really do. Like, you got a lot of children out there that are they need a home. And I really respect the kind of person that will open up their home and their pocketbooks and the rest of their lives and bring children in and provide a safe place for them so they can grow up and be whoever, they are to be. But in this case, I don't think this family should have ever been able to adopt this child because clearly they are abusive. This is straight up abuse. It's one thing for your religious viewpoint with your body, but we're talking about your child. It makes me wonder what Adeline thinks. Has everybody asked her what she thinks? Or has she been growing up with these people for the last, I guess it'll be 8 years? They adopted her when she was 4. She's 12 now. And so they've sort of like put all these thoughts in her brain. Part of me feels like she probably would want to get the COVID vaccine so she can grow up and live the rest of her life. Shame on these parents. If this girl dies, they should be charged with her death. And I don't believe that God is telling her this. I believe that she's probably on Newsmax and Fox, and she's probably that whole conservative anti-vax movement. And so she's got that in her head. And instead of being a good parent and doing what's necessary for her child, she's projecting her own political views into this situation. Children's hospitals should absolutely not change their policy because there are bigger things to consider than just this child. For instance, let's say they change the policy. They give this young girl a transplant, and because she doesn't have the COVID vaccine, she dies. Her body her body's immune system is going to be lowered, as Kevin spoke to earlier. That's the reason why they take the vaccines, to make sure that the body does not reject the transplant. If the body rejects the transplant, there's multiple victims, not just that person, but the person who was next in line who might be willing to take the vaccine. This is bad parenting, bad politics. And I'll say it again. If this girl dies, these parents should be charged with her death.
Yeah, so I won't go so far as that, Nathan, but you did make a point that I was going to follow up and make, which is if I would be critical of the parents in this situation, it would be here. Is if you know what your so they according to the reports, they knew when they adopted her that she had this heart condition and was going to need a transplant or some procedures in order for her to be able to survive. If you know that when you're adopting a child and you know that vaccinations are a part of the process of being able to participate in that, what they should have done was pull themselves out of the adoption of this particular child. Adopt a healthier child, someone who doesn't have these issues that won't conflict with your religious beliefs. At the point that you find out that you could potentially be costing this young person an opportunity to get healthy because of your religious beliefs and your adoption, I think both her and the adoption and the agency issuing the adoption, both should have said, this is not a good match. This is not a good match for these reasons. If, as they're saying, that this really is a part of their religious convictions that they've had, and they're not just falling prey to, the politics and the social media of the day. If this is in fact their religious belief, they owe that obligation, I think, to that young lady to pass on that opportunity and seek adoption of a different child at some point, to give her an opportunity to land with a family that might give her that chance. Right. And I also think that you make a good point about asking this young lady, what her desires are.
Right.
I think as a parent, as you said, it's one thing for this to be, and I can't remember how old this young lady is.
She's 12.
She's 12, right? So in my religious faith, she's not even yet old enough to sort of be able to make her own sort of religious determinations for herself. Like, you basically have to be what they call of like age of consent, almost, where you're mature enough, you have enough mental acuity, you can kind of understand things well enough to make your confession to a particular, religious set of religious beliefs and faith. Up until that point, it is kind of on the parents. But I think, they owe her, I think this family owes her that much to ask her what it is that she would want, to give her that opportunity until she's at an age. And if she's at an age later on where she, decides that, hey, I don't want to do the vaccines anymore, for that particular reason or whatever, let that be her decision at an age where she's old enough to make that decision. But I think no matter how old you are, I think you can make the decision on whether or not you want to have a chance to live or not. Absolutely. And I do agree with that point. Now, I won't go so far as to say that if something happens to this young lady, the parents should be charged. Because look, well, let's face it, even if she had the transplant, right, there's no guarantee that she could survive. I mean, she could reject the transplant, she could die. So even receiving
no, I'm saying if they do not get a transplant based upon what has been stated, their beliefs, and this girl dies, they should be charged. That's abuse. Straight up. And I'll take it a step further. I wonder if this was their biological child.
That's what I was
if when they looked in this little girl's face, they saw themselves, I wonder if they would have this same stance. Or because she's Asian and not from their own loins, it's easy to stand on principle because, yeah, they're losing something, but they're not losing their biological child. I mean, I feel for this young girl. I really do. Because she did not deserve to be adopted by people who want to play games with her life like that. She deserved better.
I have more questions than anything, I think. To kind of backtrack a little bit about, asking her what she would like. I think that that's a valiant effort, but I also think that it would just be futile because at 12 years old, if you are being raised by hyper religious, evangelistic parents, by 12, you can do enough indoctrination to kind of get the answer that you want. So I think that it would, like, you could ask her what she wanted, but 9 times out of 10, she's probably going to agree with what whatever her parents have taught her at this point at 12. And I only say that, and I I only say that because I was a church kid. I grew up in the church from before I could even talk and walk. And so I know what that's like. Like there is a level of indoctrination that comes with being raised by a super religious in a super religious household where you don't even know what you're saying just yet until you get out here in the world and you got to kind of discover God for yourself. I had to take that personal journey with God to truly have reverence and respect for a relationship with God as an adult, going through adult stuff before I actually understood the importance of having a relationship with God. As a kid, I was just saying whatever I was taught. I was just saying whatever was instilled in me as a child. And so I remember I literally was thinking about this the other day. I got baptized at the age of 11. I didn't do it because I felt some divine, you know, yearning or desire to be baptized. I did it because all my friends in the church was getting baptized, and it was like the thing to do. Like every weekend, like clockwork, I knew one of my friends was getting baptized, and I didn't want to miss the trend. So I want to get baptized. Can I get baptized? It was never about being saved or any of that. It was just this is what we do because we was raised in the church. So I think asking a 12-year-old what she would want is and trying to pinpoint her own personal religious beliefs at 12, I don't think that that would fare well the way that people are thinking that it would. I think that if she had one parent who was religious and one parent who wasn't, then maybe it would be a better, a more accurate account of what she might have come to conclusions to for herself. But with two super religious parents in a religious household, you're gonna get a regurgitation of whatever they've already taught her. But
Maybe, right,
also,
David, but I slightly disagree with that because here's the one thing that I know to be true, regardless of people's religious beliefs. You know, the saying, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. The reality is that in most cases, when people are faced with their mortality, they're going to try to survive. They're not just going to lay down and say, "Oh, it's a wrap." Jesus, take me. That's not what it is. What my experience is, most people like, give me the medicine, give me the surgery, give me the procedure, whatever is going to extend their life. Because the reality is that we all love life. We all love our family and people who are around us. And no matter how religious we may be, nobody is in a hurry to escape that. So I think even at the age of 12, I think the survival instinct in healthy minded individuals is always so strong that people are always going to choose life if given the option or the attempt to extend life.
but
So
again, that's under the assumption that
I
she's
think even
healthy
with the
minded.
hmm?
If you are being raised under super evangelistic parents who have made a whole media
But we don't
storm
know.
out
But
of
we
your
don't know that.
illness,
I mean, we don't know
you
that that's
probably ain't
necessarily
been
who
raised
these
in the
people
most mentally healthy home. I'm just gonna say. I mean, that's just how I feel. If you have been raised under super evangelistic Christian parents who have made your entire sickness like their whole claim to fame, and they did miss out on saying that we are somehow kind of related to JD Vance as well. Like I don't believe that there is any circumstance in which, like I said, unless she has some other outside influence who might be a little bit more mentally stable, I don't believe that there's a way that she would naturally be able to override that indoctrination and to choose that instinctual nature of I just want to live. I think that it's gonna be whatever her parents have taught her and indoctrinated into her, and I think that it's unfortunate. I again, God ain't never told me that the vaccine was against my faith or any of that. But I don't have whatever relationship they claim to have with God. I don't have that. I believe that everybody has a very personal, unique relationship with God. So I don't know. I just know if it were me, give me all the vaccines, give me extra vaccines, whatever you think is gonna help the transplant be successful, give it to me, please. But I also, again, I can't. I don't know enough about these people and their beliefs because
and,
I also want to know. I also want to know what is the implications that they believe they will face if taking a vaccine. Like, what do they think is the, I guess, punishment, or what is the the spiritual implication of taking vaccines? What do they believe, or why, or what is the process of which they believe that's against God? I would love to know that because at this point, it's just a statement being tossed out there. What is
That's
it that they actually believe?
That's a
you make
fair question, but as a parent, let me say this. As a parent, I ask my son all kind of questions and get his opinion about what he wants to wear in the morning, what food he wants to eat. Does he want to be in band? Does he want to play basketball? Do you think if I'm in a situation like this, it's improper to ask him, do he want to take a vaccine so he can be suitable to get a transplant?
No.
Regardless of whatever the answer might be, and I understand what you're saying, Raven, and you might very well be right. You still got to ask that question.
Yeah.
And to Kevin's point, life wants to keep living. Life wants to keep living. The more I think about this, these are not just bad parents. These are bad people. I don't believe for 1 second that God, with all the problems going on in the universe, is telling some woman whether you should get a vaccine or not. Again, I'll stand by this. I would love to know, and I wonder if this was their biological child,
Exactly.
would they be in a position to take such a strong stance that might lead to this young girl losing her life?
Yeah.
Shame on these parents. This young girl, I'll say it again. This young girl deserved better. And shame on these parents, because the parents are trying to shame Children's Hospital. They're trying to make it all about religion. This ain't about religion. This is that wacky, anti-vax, Fox News, we don't know what's in the vaccine. Kamika made an excellent point. She said, look, so you don't trust the science of the vaccine, but you trust the science of the transplant? Come on, y'all. Call it what it is.
Yeah.
These are terrible people, period.
Yeah. Nathan, look, you raise a lot of good points, and I'll just there are just a few things that I'll interject here, from a faith standpoint and some other areas. Raven said something that I think is important for us to all remember and consider, is that we don't know enough about these people to make any type of declarative statements. Because I'll say this, look, up until about a week ago or whenever the media descended around this story and it became public, whether that was for political reasons or whatever reasons, we had no clue who these people were. And they had no reason to be anything other than who they were in the particular moment as they were dealing with it. They've been thrust into the spotlight, had some stories written about them, which is somebody who works in the media. And I think if you've ever been subject to a story or have done anything, knows that, the sound bites and snippets that you get in a news story, a TV interview, are not the fullness of who any one person is. We're only getting a snapshot, a soundbite, a moment in time of who someone is, or even what the depths of their beliefs are. So I think in just being fair, as somebody who does this, for a living, we're not getting the full picture. There's a lot more that we don't know than the very little bit of information that we do know. So I realize we're on here giving opinions, and that's what we're supposed to be doing. And we've all got them. We can't help ourselves from having them. But I think even as we move forward, we got to move forward with a little bit of humility that says there's more that we don't know than what we do know, particularly about these people. And that deserves a little bit of grace. Now, I'm not saying ultimately that you're wrong. I'm just saying that there's a lot of information that we don't have.
But what else do we need to know? What else is we know enough?
Well, you can't say that, because you don't. How can you say what else do you need to know when you don't know everything? Because there's any bit of information that could come into your awareness that could change your thought.
Like
I knew I was wrong.
What?
I knew I was right a couple podcasts ago when I was arguing about Alicia Reese. Turned out I came into some information that changed my perspective and told me that I was dead wrong.
I tried to tell you, bro. I tried to tell you. But in this situation, they have a daughter that needs a transplant or she's going to die.
Yeah,
they're saying they don't believe in the vaccines based on religious views. What else do we need to know? That's enough.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that may be for you and a bunch of other people to
right.
To
for me. Right. For sure.
Yeah.
For me.
The other thing that I will say, and I just have to say this from a spiritual theological perspective, you said that with all of the things going on in the universe, God is concerned with this particular situation. And again, not to preach a sermon, but God cares about all of our issues, no matter how small. And to think that God, who is infinite, that we can limit, God can be everywhere. He's dealing with everything all at one single time. He's dealing with you, Raven, all 5 of us on this podcast. Whether
He
you
is
believe
the same
him or
God
not,
who left the
at the same
99.
time, at the same time, while he's dealing with a whole bunch of other stuff. So we can't place the same limitations that we have on God to say, hey, there are bigger things to be worried about. God, the Bible teaches me that God cares about even the smallest issues in my life. So I would just pause to say that from a spiritual theological standpoint, this is not too small to be beneath God's observance.
This is
And
too
that's
small to
why,
be beneath. This is
and
beneath God's purview. God
and
did not call this woman or say a thing to this woman about not taking a vaccine for their child. I do not believe that God did that one bit. This is we need to say something to make it seem like we're sympathetic. So let's throw God into it. That's what this is.
Yeah,
you
that's
could be
1000%.
100% right. You could be 100% right, Nate. I
Or
just
wrong.
don't know enough
Or
about
wrong.
these people to make that
What? What
assumption.
else do you
I
need to
don't
know,
know.
Raven?
I don't know enough about these people and their spiritual walk. I don't know nothing. I don't know nothing about that, so I can't make that assumption that it's just politics. Truthfully, I hadn't. It, like you said, it hadn't crossed my purview until you sent me the link of the article that you found to talk about it today. So I don't know if I can say that this is not something that God told her. I can't say that for certain. What I can say is that I know that I serve a God who leaves the 99 to go 10 to the 1 all the time. So I can't assume that this whole vaccine matter is not in his purview. I feel like we limit God when we say stuff like that. Just like Kevin said, God is so infinite and so vast. If I've learned nothing else in my own personal spiritual journey, God is so infinite and so vast that He is way bigger than any of us humanly can even conceptualize. And so to make the assumption that while He is also making sure that the fate of the entire world is still in the balance, to say that he can't also to have a quick conversation with a mother about whether or not vaccines are cool for her and her family. I just think that that's putting limitations on God that are more human than anything else.
I understand.
But I don't necessarily disagree with the things that you said if your assumptions about these people are correct. If they just doing this because it's political and it's their 15 minutes of fame, then fuck them. They're terrible people, they're abusive, and they deserve everything that's come to them in the afterlife. But if not, who am I to judge about what God said to them about how they take care of their family?
Let's
That's
stay
why I
on
want to
this.
know more.
I think
Let's
what's
stay
fair
on
to
this for a
say.
second.
I think what's fair to say, and what everybody can say, is that this wouldn't be my choice, might not be your choice, might not be Raven's choice. I think that's fair for anybody to say that from my perspective, from my point of view, this wouldn't be my choice, and I don't agree with it. But the reality is it's not our choice; it's their choice. It's Children's
Unfortunately,
Hospital's choice.
I wish it was my choice. I would save that young girl.
And we all have to, one way or another, we all have to live with the consequences of our choices.
I wish it was my choice. I would save that young girl. But let's stay in this kind of ballpark with the same theme. Let's go to Christ Hospital and let's talk about Ken Long. That's Mr. Ken Long right there, his wife and his granddaughter. And Ken Long is a veteran. I respect veterans. Ken Long is in a very similar situation, but he's in Christ Hospital. He needs a heart transplant. But because of his views about the COVID vaccine, he's got concerns about it. He has said that he is willing to die rather than take the vaccine. And he is desperately trying to appeal to the folks over at Christ Hospital to change their policy. They have a very similar policy. This policy was put in place because there are concerns about whether the body will reject the transplant. If they give this man a transplant without the COVID vaccine and his body rejects it, there are two victims, not just him, but the person that's next in line who would have taken the COVID vaccine, right? So we got to think it's bigger than just the individual. But what do you think about the story of Ken Long? In this case, he's making a decision about himself. Now, let me add to this. His wife, as you see right there, and my heart goes out to them. Heart goes out to them. This is a cold, cruel, ugly world in some cases. So the family you have, the friends that you have, keep them close because that may be all you get in this lifetime to really care about you. You find somebody that loves you, you better love them back because that is rare. But as I read in the article, his wife disagrees with him. She wants him to actually get the COVID vaccine. What is your thoughts about this scenario? Man says he's willing to die, stand on business.
My position, yeah, I agree with that. My position is no different, and this may sound, a little bit cold or insensitive, and I don't mean it to come off that way. But if I say that I believe in something so strongly that I'm willing to die for it, then don't ask Christ Hospital to change their policy. Like, if that's what you believe in and that's their policy and you're willing to die on it, then God bless you. My prayers are with you. Um, I hope that something breaks for you in a way that, doesn't require Christ Hospital to compromise their requirements or put anyone else at risk or anything like that. Maybe you'll get some type of healing that we can't see, and I'd pray for that. But if you are going to say, hey, this is a belief that I'm willing to die over, then you don't get to complain about the process. You've got to stand on that. If you really believe in that and your faith is that strong, then I'm going to stand on that and I'm going to say, God is going to make another way for me. And if he doesn't, oh well, that's God's will. If that's how you believe and you have that strength of conviction, then you have to stand on it. What you can't do is complain about the process, ask to change the process in a way that where it might punish someone else who does not share your beliefs. So he needs to stand on that. And I feel for his wife. I feel for his family. And I think that's, again, being spiritually, that's why the Bible talks about being equally yoked with your partner, that you got to be careful who you pick, that you need to make sure that you're on one accord with who you are aligning yourself with, because when you don't, this is the type of situation that you find yourself in. So, people can criticize the biblical teachings or whatever, but there's universal truth in some of that. If you are a Democrat and you marry a Republican, you may find yourself in these types of situations. If you are a spiritual person and you partner with somebody who is not a spiritual person, you're going to find yourself in situations like this. So, hey, I feel for the guy. I wish him no ill will. My prayers are with him. But if that's what he says he's willing to die for, then, unfortunately, we may find out.
During COVID, my best friend, he refused to take the vaccine whenever we were all taking it. And I don't think it has anything to do with political. It has to do with a growth mindset and set mindset. And he was so set. I mean, it's my best friend in life. I'm talking about to this day, my very best friend. He refused to take the vaccine. His daughters took the vaccine. His wife took the vaccine. I took the vaccine. He got COVID, refused, and he's dead now because he refused to take the vaccine. Idiot. My best friend in my life, because he's an idiot. And because he refused to take the vaccine. So this is something that's like a subject that's way highly politicized, but I don't believe it has anything. He was a Republican, but I think he was a bullheaded guy who makes no sense. And to this day, I don't understand why I just think I don't get it. I still don't get it to this day.
Hey, Phil, your thoughts? What do you think about this man, Ken Long?
Couple, because on the one hand, I do disagree with you, Nathan, about they're bad people, because like I've said, I know so many people like that. Keep in mind, these people adopted or have 12 kids. I think many of them adopted. I know these kind of people, and I really believe they're good-hearted people because I have tons of friends like it. But I also agree 100% with Nathan that they are no doubt victims of the whole Fox News right-wing extremist BS that so many are subject to. And I don't know for sure, but I would guess this guy at Christ Hospital, if I had to guess where he listens or what his media is, I think I'd have a real good, strong suggestion that it's the Fox, it's News Nation, and all that kind of stuff. And to me, this is a reflection of what I would call the veil that the MAGA movement has pulled over so many millions of people, including many, many of my friends. Okay, it's a veil. It's a veil that you're told things that just aren't true, but you just believe them because the leader says it. He says that January 6th was the day of love. The videos, how clear could they be that they're beating up the cops? Oh, but it's a day of love. We accept that. This veil, I see it over in so many. I almost feel, I don't want to get too spiritual. I feel like God is judging this country because they have fallen prey to all these conspiracies, and I think the damage to our country is and will be
Well, I think
significant.
Good topic. Go ahead, Kevin. Go ahead.
Oh
Jump in,
no,
bro.
I think somebody said it in the comments. I think one of the things that Trump has ushered in is this era of anti-intellectualism, which is true. I think that there has been this thing that intelligence is looked at as elitism. It's looked at as it's looked
Or
as this type
facts.
of thing. It's like when Trump says, and I love the poorly educated. He makes fun of that. He makes fun of that stuff, kind of mocking those people, in the midst of saying that somehow or another, if you're a thinking person, if you're an intelligent person, if you regard facts, if you look at research, then somehow or another you're an elitist of some sort, and there's something wrong with you. And I think that, this dumbing down of the country is not to our benefit. It leads to this type of mentality where people reject facts and science. I saw somebody in the chat that said, well, people died from taking the COVID vaccine as well. Look, the COVID vaccine was never presented as a cure to COVID or anything that would stop you from getting it. What it said is by taking the vaccine, it can reduce the impact and the possibilities of you contracting it so seriously that it would kill you, particularly those folks who are elderly. I think we know that over time, the younger, the healthier you are, in addition to the vaccine, the more that you can shake it off. But people who are of a certain age, they really need the vaccine.
Now,
Well,
be careful,
people of a
Kevin. Just
certain
be
age
careful
or
there.
who have immune deficiencies or things of that nature
I'm very sensitive about this
definitely
age
definitely
discrimination
need to
stuff. You know
take
that.
the vaccine. So I think what we've got to do is look at not these rare exceptions, and this is where the conspiracy theorists thrive. Like, they thrive on not what the vast majority of people are saying. They'll find the one doctor or the one study that refutes the other 100 studies that say this is the case, and people latch on to that. Look, there are 56,000 emergency room visits for people who have bad reactions to Tylenol every year, right? There are 500 people who die, from taking Tylenol every year. Do you think anybody listening within the sound of my voice is not going to take Tylenol the next time they get a headache or aches and pains because 500 people a year die from Tylenol? Yes, that's true, and that's a fact. People all over have different types of reactions to different types of medications because our biology, our physiology is different. So people respond to medications in different ways. Some people take the flu vaccine and they get sick. Some people take the flu vaccine and nothing happens to them, right? And so we got to stop going along with small percentages of things that happen and look at what the vast majority of the benefits and how people are reacting to things. And this is where I say where it's so frustrating to me that thinking people, that thinking is something that has been villainized in some kind of way in this country. And and the rejection of facts and science and things that we've known to be true for generations, right? The measles and polio vaccines that have worked for generations without any problems, right? And you got this quack scientry that's out here now that's trying to convince people that this is bad for you, of generations of eradicating diseases that are now starting to crop up again. Come on, man. People got to use their brains, and it's just frustrating.
Yeah,
Can I
it
just
reminds
can
me of
I
the
just
movie Idiocracy, right? The dumbing down of America. We are on a roll. The dumbing down of America will be one of the factors that does us all in. But I want to pull this picture up again because, on some levels, man, I have a deep connection to this story because for folks who may not know, or maybe you forgot, like 5 years ago, I had a heart attack. I had 100% blockage in one of my veins in my heart. If I didn't go to the hospital as quickly as I did, I wouldn't be here right now. I currently have 2 stents in my heart. And afterward, and for a long time afterward, I found myself apologizing to my wife over and over again because I wasn't taking care of myself. I wasn't doing what I need to do to be healthy so I could be here for her and for our children. So when I think about this story, I've got two minds of it. On one hand, it's refreshing to see a person that's willing to unalive for their religious or whatever convictions, because a lot of people talk a lot of stuff, but when the rubber meets the road, they always back down. So on that level, I respect somebody that says I'm gonna stand on business no matter what the consequences is. On the other hand, you are a family man. It's not just about you. It's about that beautiful little granddaughter. It's about your wife, Ken. Your wife. You're going to leave your wife and your granddaughter in this crazy world so you can stand on business about a vaccine? It's ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous. Married men, listen to your wife. Listen to your wife. What's the use of having a lifelong partner that when you get into a situation, you're not going to listen to her? I don't understand it. If your wife tells you to get the vaccine, you get the vaccine. Period. That's it. Nothing else needs to be said, because there's no other human being on this world that wants you here more than she does. Right? But this is probably that male ego, which we'll get into in just a little second here. But go ahead, Remy. You gonna say something?
I was just gonna. I'm gonna start with
Oh,
a question, and
I'm
then
sorry, Phil. I'm sorry, Phil. Phil, I had you muted because there's some distortion. Go right ahead, bro.
I got a little short comment. If your wife tells you not to take the vaccine, then take the vaccine.
That's a fair point. Then take the vaccine. Good point. Yes.
I'm gonna start with a question, and I want
Sure.
everybody to just answer real fast, and then I'll make my point. Y'all have heard, yeah. Nathan has invited me on this podcast a number of times. I believe y'all perceive me to be a pretty intelligent young lady, right?
Yeah. Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Until you say something
I
crazy.
wish they perceived me to be as intelligent as they
You know what?
perceive you,
No,
Rachel.
no,
Okay.
I
Put it
do
that
not. It
way.
depends on what you say next.
I knew that was coming. I knew that
Phil,
was coming.
you're sexier than your brain. That's really what this is all about. It's all about your looks, brother, not the brain.
I only asked the question.
Look, I do not want to be looked at as an object. Let me get that right out.
You're
All right.
fine.
Sorry,
I
Remy.
only
Go
asked
ahead.
the question because I sit before you as somebody who I previously said I only took the vaccine because it was required by my job. My issue with the vaccine was never the science. It was never because I felt like it was going to kill me or any of those things. It was just I did not appreciate how it was being weaponized, how it was being forced on people. I think that more than anything, I'm not even gonna say more. I think a portion
Okay, just a second. Who was it being forced
people
on,
like
Nathan? The
myself whose
COVID.
employer told them that you can no longer work here unless you take the vaccine.
Okay. Can I
Sure.
respond to that real quick? Because I totally disagree that this whole theory or movement that it's a violation of my rights that my employer is making me get vaccinated or a school is. Hey, come on! This is public health. What if it was tuberculosis
So then
or
you get
polio or
vaccinated.
whatever? You're saying, or excuse me. Whoever suggested back in those days that I have a right not to take the polio vaccine even if I infect the entire school or my entire workplace? I feel if you want to stay home and isolate yourself from the public, I have no problem with that. Take whatever you don't take what you don't want. But if your kid goes to school or if you work in a company, you have no right to endanger the health
And
of
I would
all those
also argue
people.
that you have no right to impose your medical beliefs on me. But that's the point that I'm making.
And they don't,
The
Raven.
point that I'm
They
Essentially,
give
making.
you a
yeah.
choice.
Can I
I
finish
mean,
my
I
point? I
think
just want to finish my point and we can
okay.
discuss. My only thing is it was never that like I said, it was never that I argued the science. It was never that I because I live with a 85-year-old. I was raised and live with my 85-year-old grandmother. I wanted her to get the vaccine because it wasn't that the science didn't check out for me. She's 85 years old. She has AFib and other, immunocompromising health things that I think that she's a great candidate for taking the COVID vaccine. She gets it like clockwork every year. I don't have an issue with that. I am at the time, I believe that was what, 2020. I was 29, 28, something like that. I was in the top shape of my health. I don't have any children who rely on me. I looked at myself, I looked at my health and decided for myself that outside of being what I felt being forced into it by my employer, I didn't have any reason to take the vaccine. It just didn't, it wasn't something that I would have chosen for myself. And so I did feel a kind of way to have to be put in a situation where my employer was requiring me to keep employment to get a vaccine. It just didn't feel right.
Yeah, but what
there
if
are all
you
sorts
infect?
of
What
things.
if you infect? What if you
Well,
infect
let me
everybody
break
in
it
the
down even
company?
Everybody else
smoother.
got vaccinated.
Let me break this down more simply than that, Phil. Is Raven,
I'll
there
go
are
next.
all sorts of things that your employer requires you to do that are conditional for your employment, or even
Absolutely.
sometimes for you to even get a job that they require you to do. Many of them subject you to background checks. Many of them force
Absolutely.
you to take drug tests. So there are a lot of things that employers can ask you to do that are conditional for your employment there. You don't have to do it, just like a breathalyzer. If a police officer pulls you over and asks you to take a
Absolutely.
breathalyzer, you can refuse it. But guess what? You're going to jail. You could have refused the vaccine, but the consequence of that is your employer is saying you can't come into work. And there are good public health reasons for that, as Phil sort of laid out. Look, the reason why they were trying to get people to take the vaccine is because they were trying to, as quickly as they could, knock down COVID. And you know that you got to reach a certain percentage of the population has to be inoculated to create herd immunity. It was in the best interest of everybody to try to get because the thing that never made sense to me is all of these people who wanted to get back to work and get back to life as normal as soon as possible were the same people who were arguing against the method that was going to allow us to do that as quickly as possible, which is trying to create herd immunity. It made no sense. We want to reopen everything. We want to get kids back in school, but we're willing to risk killing our neighbors in order to do that because we don't want to take a scientifically, I get nothing's 100%, but it was as close to 100% as you could get, scientifically, that people don't want to do that. And when you talk about, if you've got a problem with these parents not getting their kid vaccinated so that they can get a heart transplant, I don't understand how you can think of those parents as bad people for not doing that. But you are essentially doing the same thing when you're walking around, particularly being carriers of a deadly virus. I didn't see my mother for a year because I was so concerned that at her age, that I'm out in the streets interviewing people doing this. I didn't want to be the one responsible for giving my mother COVID, and possibly being the one who was responsible for killing her. So that was my primary motivation for getting the vaccine. I could have gave a damn about myself because I believed that I was going to be okay. And if I grew a third arm, you know what? I could use a third arm. But at any rate, it's like it was just the insanity of me of that people were willing to risk the lives of their neighbors and even other people in their family who were susceptible based on junk science. And that's the part that was just kind of like the hardest thing for me. Same with the mask.
Like I said, I didn't have any of those qualms with the science. I wanted my grandmother to get the vaccine. I just felt very uncomfortable with it becoming a thing where we had to get it. Like it wasn't a choice. That was my only gripe with it.
It was a choice.
In certain ways you can argue it's a choice, but in the middle of a pandemic where nobody's hiring and the job that I have was technically considered essential, but anything else that I would have gone out for at the time I would not have been employed, period, because nobody was hiring during COVID. I would have not been able to sustain my life if I would have made that choice to not get the vaccine. I didn't have anything to fall back on. So it was not it was a choice, but it wasn't an easy choice to make. And so I had to make a choice that would have allowed me to and be able to continue paying my bills. I didn't have a choice. Like you can say I had a choice, but I didn't really have a choice. And a lot of people didn't really have a choice, which is the only reason why they ended up doing what they had to do. We can say that it's a choice because technically it is a choice. But if I look around at my life and the things and the responsibilities that I am actually responsible for, I didn't have a choice. And so that was the portion of it that made me feel very, very uncomfortable. Now, all that being said, I am not going to let a vaccine because, like I said, I had the same whatever them parents or whenever Mr. Ken Lawson or whatever his name is or Long had that conversation with God that told them that the vaccine wasn't for them. I didn't have that conversation, so that would have never been the caveat for me.
So Ray,
It was just how uncomfortable the situation made me feel. But if I am going to be put in a situation where it's between my life and a vaccine, I'm gonna take the vaccine out every day.
Let me ask you this. So this is what don't make sense to me. So if you had no issue with the science, and again, I just laid out, there are tons of other prerequisites that your employer has. and that are conditional under your employment. So you have no problem with a drug test. You have no problem with a
Well, I haven't been drug tested in years, so I don't know.
but I'm just saying, like a lot of employers, you wouldn't have a problem if your employer say, hey, Raven, in order for you to get this job, you got to go take this drug test. You would probably go take it unless you had consumed some drugs, and then you probably find a friend to take it for you, as most people do in those situations. But I'm saying
I can't relate.
Most of the time, there are plenty of requirements that employers give you that are conditional on employment that we don't have any problem with. So I could see if you were saying like, yeah, I had a real problem from a health.
But those things make sense to me. It makes sense to me for an employer to require you to take a drug test because they don't want you to be on the job under the influence making decisions about either somebody's money or somebody's well-being or something like that.
So it doesn't make sense for you for an employer to say, we don't want you to come into the workplace and potentially infect your coworkers. So that doesn't make sense.
I want to jump in whenever I get a chance.
But the things that you're listing, a drug test, a criminal background check, and all those other things, those are things that are required before getting the job. I'm already on the job, but now you're telling me to keep the job. I have to now take or get a vaccine. It kind of puts me in a trick bag a little bit because I could if I knew that this was like nobody saw COVID coming, but now that it's here, you're requiring me to take this vaccine that I've never been unless you're working like healthcare where they require you to take like a flu vaccine or something like that, or they require you to take the TB test. I know that's a thing in healthcare. Like those are things that you walk in and you make the choice before employment to have to do those things if you want employment there. This is something that people were having to deal with on the job already. You're telling me that I have to take a vaccine on the job already, or else I will no longer have this job. This is how I am paying my bills and making my living. And I've been doing it like this for the last few years. I am now in a very, I'm between a rock and a hard place where I'm kind of forced to have to make this decision. I think that that's the difference to me. Those are all things that you have to make the decision for yourself before you even take the job. I'm already in a process of trying to find employment. So if I don't take this job, there's another job that I could possibly take before I, invest all of my time and energy into this one place of employment where I have now made a livelihood from versus already being in the midst of my livelihood and now having to make a decision of whether or not I'm going to walk away from it. Some people made that decision for themselves. I just wasn't in that place to do the same.
I would say that's the nature of a job, right? The nature of a job, real quick, Tarris, the nature of working for someone else is between a rock and a hard place. I need this job, and they might tell me to do some stuff that I don't really want to do, but I need this job. That's the nature of working for other people. But go ahead, Tarris.
That's true, and that's also why most people end up getting to a place because of those decisions of wanting to become entrepreneurs and work for themselves.
Oh, absolutely.
I think what we're not talking about and what nobody even mentioned is the shaming that was going on during COVID, whether you were vaccinated or not. I was vaccinated and I got vaccinated early, but I didn't tell amongst the circle that I roam around in. The majority of the people, nurses, were unvaccinated, so I wasn't going around around those circles saying that I was vaccinated. And on the other hand, whenever I was around vaccinated people, I wasn't promoting that it was just a whole shaming that was going on. I could see how Raven was saying that she didn't want someone telling her what to do. And then Phil made a comment, and I mean, it's kind of willy-nilly that he was doing it on accidentally on purpose, but like he didn't know. And he was like, so why wouldn't you? It's public health and you should just do whatever the government said. Tuskegee had my antennas going up. From the beginning, like how they weaponized Tuskegee and vaccinations and they experimented on black humans. And so when I was talking to doctors whenever they were first doing the rollout, and I was like, they were asking me my opinion, and I was like, hey, black people might not go for it because of Tuskegee. They kind of looked at each other, they looked at me and scratched their head, and they went on with what they were doing because they didn't care. They didn't care about the implications of how black people might have thought.
Yeah, I think Tarris, that's well founded, and I know that there's a lot of distrust that exists among black people as it relates to the medical profession and the government, and a lot of that is founded in really good reasons. But at the end of the day, I say we all got to make the best decisions that we can, and I always like to base mine in sort of facts and logic versus wild conspiracy, what is more likely versus what is the least likely thing to happen. And I think that, part of what you described as sort of vaccine shaming, I kind of looked at as more so as desperation and a sense of urgency than shaming. I think a lot of people were, again, in the interest of trying to save lives and return back to society as quickly as quickly as possible. I think people were just frustrated by people who said that that's what they wanted, but in a sense were kind of retarding the process by refusing to participate in the thing that could get us there the quickest. And I get, different people looked at things in different ways. And again, we all got to try as best we can to respect each other's views. But I think a lot of that was built in, not necessarily like trying to shame people. I think a lot of it was in frustration, because it's like we all wanted the same thing and we're all trying to get in one direction, but it's tough when there's a segment of folks that seemingly for no good reason, are resistant to the thing that's going to get everybody to where they want to go the quickest. And so I think it was less about trying to shame folks than just a general frustration that, the very thing you say you want, you're blocking it, right? Because not for anything that's based in science or good medicine. It's based in a lot of conspiracy and politics. I mean, I think what I find is amazing is that, it was under Donald Trump's administration in Operation Lightspeed that the vaccine was developed. Yet many of his followers won't take the vaccine, and many died, to COVID, because they wouldn't take the thing that his administration created. So it's like, if you trust Donald Trump and the people that he had working for him, because he only hired the best folks, if you believe that and you back that, then you should trust the vaccine implicitly because it was developed under your guy. Like, that's the type of stuff that people were banging their heads against the wall. It's like, how did this become a Democrat thing, right? Like, it was developed under a Republican administration, and now it's like it's some vast Democratic conspiracy to poison the public. Come on, man. This is the type of stuff that doesn't make sense. That if you're a thinking person, it's frustrating as hell to sit back and listen to some of this stuff. And that's where you realize the pollution of the politics and the propaganda.
Say response to something Tarris said. Can you guys hear me? Because I was muted for a while. Can you hear me? Okay. Tarris, I didn't say that the government should mandate that everybody gets the shot. That wasn't what I said. What I said was that if you are working for somebody like in a environment, there's a bunch of people, it's perfectly appropriate and that employer, when there's a deadly contagious disease should absolutely require everyone who works there to get the shot, because you're endangering the health of others. And I don't care what kind of offices or state or whatever it is, that if you are endangering the health of other people around you, it's appropriate that you be required to get the shot.
I thought it was a patriotic thing to do. I thought it was absolutely. If ever we talk about being united as a country and looking out for our neighbor, like, that is the way to do it. It's not about, for me, it was never about whether I was going to contract COVID and die from it. It's about the people who I loved, who I knew were susceptible, that I did not want to be the carrier or the germinator of that, and being responsible for sending somebody I cared about, whether that was a family member, a friend, or a coworker, to the hospital because I wasn't aware of some pre-existing condition they had that made them susceptible, or that they were elderly. Hell, there were a lot of people who caught COVID who probably thought that they were walking around fine and didn't discover that they had some underlying condition until they got it, and got sick as all get out. So that was a bit of the arrogance among the quote unquote people who thought they were invincible because they're healthy. There are a lot of people who are walking around and don't realize they might have some kind of affliction until it really catches a hold of them. So the fact that you look fine and you feel healthy is not necessarily an indicator that there's something inside of you going on that you don't know about.
Yeah, I mean, ask Donald Trump. He gave COVID to Chris Christie. So Good stuff.
Oh, not to
And
mention
the
his
rallies.
rallies,
Yes,
Nathan,
yes.
where
Oh, but nothing about
thousands of people were
the
exposed,
Black
but he
Lives
didn't
Matter
care.
rallies. They didn't have
I
people
don't
out
want
there with.
to.
Oh, come on now.
Uh,
Don't even go
yeah.
there, guys.
I will
Okay.
say
Oh,
this, as
okay.
somebody who was resistant to getting the vaccine, when I did eventually catch COVID, and I may be caught, I think I caught COVID for the first time and the only time that I can recall last year. It was like I was knocking on death's door. If at least it felt that way. It was the
Hmm.
worst sick I had ever experienced in my life. And I do believe that if I had not had those antibodies already within myself, that it might have been a lot worse. So I
Yeah.
respect, like I said, I never argued the science. I get it. I just at that time I just was very uncomfortable with how forced I felt. But I don't regret my decision at all.
So now I want you guys to switch gears for a second because we're going to move away from COVID and move into something totally different. And this isn't necessarily something that has really been burning up social media, but I was on Instagram and I came across a video and I thought, you know what? Yeah, this could be an interesting conversation. So I want to play this video for you and then I want to get your response. Check this out.
Any little thing on y'all back, we just eat that.
Yes.
For you to say I can't cry and da da da, we gonna cry and still do it.
I'm literally gonna cry with the baby attached to my titty while I'm folding laundry and probably working from home
And cooking your dinner.
cooking your dinner.
Hold on one second. Hold on one second. Let me refresh this so it starts at the beginning again. Let me.
Leaders, I think that y'all made that up and y'all don't really like it for real. Y'all hate it actually. Y'all hate it. Let's be honest. Women are
you think
amazing.
men
leaders.
hate leaders? We're
Yes.
naturally leaders.
We're naturally leaders. We have to be.
So women are better leaders than men?
Yes.
That's cap.
It's not.
That's
If you
bad.
look, if you
Y'all
statistically,
complain-
if you look it
Y'all
up,
complain about
women
any
are
little thing
tra-
on y'all back, we just
Yes.
eat that.
yes.
For you to say I can't cry and da da da, we
Yes,
gonna cry and
that's
still
nuts.
do it.
I'm literally gonna cry with the baby attached to my titty while I'm folding laundry and probably working from home
And cooking your dinner.
cooking your dinner at the same goddamn time. I asked you to clean a fork that you just used, that you left in the sink. And oh my god, bitches don't.
So you get the gist of it. So it's a podcast. It's not necessarily my favorite podcast. Not even aware of the name of the podcast, to be honest with you. I just came across it and I thought this can make for interesting conversation. So the question is very simple. Are women better leaders than men?
I think
Certain
that
aspects.
women are better leaders than men who struggle to lead. I don't necessarily think that women are better leaders than men. I think that a lot of women have been exposed to men who are terrible at leading. And I don't necessarily think that that's synonymous with women being better leaders. I think that as a woman, once you finally come across a man who is amazing at leading, you understand I could never do this. I could never actually do all this and still have to be a man in the world because and it's easy, it's very easy, and I know it's gonna be a lot of women who feel some type of way about what I'm saying, but I want you to listen to me. I come from a family that only ever really had a matriarch. We didn't have a strong patriarchal structure. It the oldest the o- my all of my elders in my family, the oldest people in my family are women. They survived and outlasted all the men in my family, so they naturally became the leaders of my family. I know what it's like to survive under a matriarch. It's a lot more difficult because there's a lot less that is covered when you don't have when you don't come from a patriarchal structure. Now I say that only in name. I don't mean in the terms of patriarchy that the politicized version of it that we discuss sometimes on when we come across different topics like misogyny and all that thing. I'm simply meaning having male leadership. It is top tier. You cannot compete with male leadership when it's in its best form. That's the caveat, when it's in its best form. However, I do believe that a good portion of women have dealt with men who have not been in their top form or tip top shape when it comes to leadership, and so you start to feel like, well, damn, can these men do anything right, or can they lead anything correctly? Because when you suffer under lacking male leadership, you as a woman have to be a good leader. Otherwise, your lineage doesn't survive. If you don't pick up his slack, you will not survive. Your children will not survive. And when you get into that mode and you've been raised by generations of women who have chosen for themselves or have been, put under bad male leadership, it's easy to breed the thinking and the mindset that male leadership sucks, that it's useless, that actually it's ineffective. All that says to me is that you've never been under proper male leadership, because when you are, you don't want nothing else but it. You don't want nothing else but it. And so I think that it's unfortunate They have some very valid points, but they're not referring to actual male leadership. What they're referring to is men who want to lead but are incapable, and that's the difference.
I
Yeah,
want to jump
I
in
agree
where
with
after Raven said. I want to jump in after with Raven, because I come from a father and a two-parent household where the father was the leader of the household, and my mother was put on this earth to serve my father and her children. That's what she said. That's what her job in life was to do. I'm here for my husband. I'm born to serve him. So whenever you're raised in that, you see things a certain way, and then but it's not always. In certain aspects, it's a very subjective subject because women lead better in certain aspects that require empathy that men don't have. But it just depends on what subject you're talking about. But like what Draven was saying, it says a lot, and I do believe there's not a lot of women out there who have. How can I say this? They're raising single mother households, so they don't know a father what it looks like to be raised by a father. And I say this a lot of times. Not a lot of people are talked tough to by a man. They never been talked tough to by a man. Sit down, move, don't be. They don't know how to react to that. And I watch a lot of young men crumble whenever real men talk to them in those certain ways. So I believe that this is a unanswerable question. It's going to lead to a whole lot of turmoil, but I do believe that in the family dynamic, when, like Raven said, if it works and you'd have a male father who leads and the mother is into her feminine and leans into that, I believe that works out for a child. Okay, and here's whenever I talk to people who are like single mother households that are raised, or who have a mother and a father who are raising children in a two-family household now, I'm like, if you believe that a mother can raise a child better on her own than a two-family household, leave your child right now. Leave them. Go to the streets. Get out in the streets. Go start going out and having multiple kids. Go out. Leave your son alone with his mother if you believe that if she can raise that child, daughter or son, better than you and her together. If you believe that single moms are the all in and be all, leave her and let her raise those children alone.
Here's the problem that I see, Nathan, is that, there's been this ongoing, for lack of a better term, competition between men and women going back from the beginning of time. And I think we got to get away from this. Men and women are equal. And what I mean by that equal is not that they shouldn't be entitled to the same opportunities and the same level of respect, but I mean equal in that men and women are not equal. They're different. Women are different from men, and in the same ways that men are different from women. And so I think women ought to be women. Women ought not to try to be like men, and men ought not to try to be like women. And I think we are different for a reason. I believe God designed it that way. And each of us have our areas of strength. I don't think good leadership is contingent upon gender, color, or anything. Good leaders are good leaders, whether you're a woman, whether you're a man, whether you're black, whether you're white. If you are a good leader, you're a good leader. And if you're a bad leader, you're a bad leader. I've had bad women leaders. I've had bad men leaders. I've had some of my best mentors have been women who have taught me a lot of things, who have been in leadership positions, starting with my mother. My dad ran the household and he made most of the bread, but my mom ran the household, and when it came to discipline, my dad would give you the lecture, but it was my mom who meted out the discipline. And so we knew that's who we wasn't going to mess with. And I didn't look at my mother as any less than my father. Sure, when it came to make the final decision and put the foot down, usually that was my father, but we looked at each of them equally with success and recognized that they had different roles, and I think that that's what we have to recognize in our society, instead of this men and women competition and trying to prove that the sexes are equal. We need to stop that, because it's not. There are some things that women are inherently better at than men are. And there are some roles that women are just not going to take on. There are some jobs in society that are men's jobs that, quite frankly, if women had to do them, they wouldn't get done, because they're not jobs that, are conducive for women to do. Likewise, there are jobs that if women were not present in our society, it wouldn't be conducive for men to do it, because we aren't very good at those jobs either. So I think we just need to accept the differences that there are between men and women, and lean into that. You know, be who you are, be the best at who you are. Women don't have to go out there and prove that they're equal to or better than a man. Be the best woman that you can be and focus on that. And likewise, men need to do the same thing. So I don't buy into this thing that either sex is better leader than the other.
So you and Tarris are dodging the question. I get it. Go ahead, Phil.
No, I mean that's as honest as I can give you. I mean,
the girls that you show the pictures of, they ain't no count anyway, so I wouldn't even care what they said. They were trash.
I mean, look,
the girls, the ones when they was on the Instagram, those ones that you
Wait,
were
so
talking
their
about
points
Instagram,
aren't valid because of what they look like?
how they carry themselves, how they carry themselves, how they were talking, how they carry themselves. So I wouldn't subscribe to what they were talking about. I wouldn't subscribe. My sons were looking for suitor women who were going to potentially be grandparents to my granddaughters, grandsons, bringing them into the world. I'd look at them, I'd be like, don't even got to worry about what they think anyway. Honestly, I'm not dodging the question. They ain't got nothing to bring to the table.
Interesting.
Go ahead, Phil. Yeah,
well,
you're on.
is my mic
women better leaders
on?
than men?
Okay. Well, let me first say, when it comes to women, I want to say I'm very submissive. Okay. But I think it's kind of interesting what the Bible says. The Bible says that the man is to be the leader of the household, but the man is to be willing to sacrifice his life for the women. A lot of times when people like to throw out, oh, I'm the leader of the household, they like the first part. They don't so much follow the second part. I think Raven was kind of referring to that in different people. But I'll give you a quick example that I think of good leadership. And, you know, my father was fairly prominent. He in medicine and all that kind of stuff and got a lot of attention. My mother was a writer and nobody really knew her other than her friends, but she wrote a book on holistic health. It was called What Your Doctor Won't Tell You. She's not a medical person, but she wrote it. And I was really proud of the fact that my father did everything he could to promote her work and promote her book. And he would insist if he went out and speaking that she'd be able to speak about her thing. And I really respected that because a lot of guys are threatened if like their wife or their woman is like achieve something. But I thought I was very proud of him. That to me, that was real leadership. He, in a sense, was putting my mom first. So I just think that's a great example.
Well, if you are a chauvinistic man, then you're going to resist what I'm going to say next. Only chauvinistic men are going to resist this. To me, it's really even barely a question. It is very, very clear that women are far better leaders than men. And I'm speaking in general terms. This is based upon a sum total of my life experience. You know, I've been in positions in which there was a man who supervised that position and a woman who supervised that position. This is also based upon my observations about the world and history as well. And it is clear to me that women are better leaders. And the reason I say that is one word: ego. Ego messes up men over and over and over
You
again.
think women don't have ego, Nathan?
And not to the same degree as men. No, they do not. No, they do not. If you look at the annals of history and you look at the problems that we have faced in this world and are facing, in almost every case, it's men behind it. Men behind it throughout the annals of history, making ego-driven decisions, testosterone-filled decisions, have messed up this world. And I'm gonna go a step further. I'm gonna make it political. In particular, Black women make the best leaders, right? In my experience and what I have seen. If we had more Black female leadership in this country be in a much better place. But we don't.
See, the reason why I don't like this argument is the same reason why I don't like the argument about, you know, who is the best, who's the GOAT, LeBron James or Michael Jordan, because there is no right answer. It's, as you said, it's a matter of what your personal experience or perspective is. And the unfortunate thing about this is why I don't like these arguments, because it's like, in other words, if I say I disagree with what you say, Nathan, then that automatically makes me have to minimize great female leaders that we've had in order to say, hey, there've been some great male leaders like from the beginning of history that have done some monumental sort of historical things that are pretty damn undeniable. So it gets us into that situation where it's like, in order to lift somebody else up, we got to minimize somebody else, and that's why I answered the question in the way that I did. What I would always say is, behind every great male leader, and I believe this, you got to have a great woman next to you. Most men who do great things have great women alongside of them. So I look at it more as a partnership. Now, unfortunately, because of the way our society is structured and has been structured, often the contribution of those women have gone under recognized or under noticed. And I will fully acknowledge that. And that's why I say we got to get out of this thing of like competing about who's better, because the reality is I'll just take my marriage as an example. You know, there are things that I am very good at, and there are things that my wife is very good at. And fortunately for me, the things that where I am not strong, those are her strengths. And so as a collective, her strengths coupled with my strengths build us up, and we both kind of fill in the gaps for where we have flaws. And I think that is how, you know, good partnerships between men and women should work, is that accentuating the strengths. Because look, let's face it, just like men have flaws, again, I ain't gonna let the sisters get out of here or the women get out of here and let them walk away from this conversation thinking that they stuff don't stink, because that absolutely is not true. You know, I love my wife, and she's always quick to tell me about my flaws, but she has a definitive blind eye to the things that's wrong with her. I can attest you to that, as we argue about it.
As we all do, though.
So there are few women that I know who can't tell you why a man ain't, you know what, but you never hear a woman admit to that. You will never hear a woman admit to not being, never. You will never, but oftentimes women can always tell you about how men are not meeting that bar, but they will never talk about how they're not meeting that bar. And so I just put that out there to say, again, these are the types of conversations when you start comparing things. That's why I say we got to realize that each of us brings strengths to the table, that there's great leadership regardless of what the gender is. And that's what we need to focus on, instead of this competition about who is better, because the reality is we all got issues. We all got flaws, but it's the unique things that make women, that make them great leaders in some ways. But then there are also flaws that women have that men don't have, that make men great leaders in situations. And I think that's the thing that we got to look at.
We can't hear you, Nate.
Yeah. So what is that? What flaws do women have that men don't have? Because in my opinion, I feel like the biggest Achilles heel that burdens male leadership is their egos. Our egos have ruined us, have ruined this country and this world in a lot of different ways. So what is it that women have, or where are women deficient where men aren't?
Can I take a stab at that answer before
Well,
Kevin?
I want Kevin to answer. He just said it, and then yeah.
No, let ladies first, man. Let's get ready.
Don't run from this. No. You said this. You said it. Don't run from this. You said it. She didn't say it.
Okay, give me the question again, Nathan. Give me the question again.
And then correct me if I'm wrong. I thought what you just said is that there are ways in which women are deficient and men aren't. And I'm like, what is that?
So, and again, this is
in the aspect of leadership.
This is just my personal opinion on things that I've observed, is that women have issues with each other that they can't get past, in the same way that when men have disagreements, they can squash it and still move forward and work together. These are things that I've witnessed. These are things that women have admitted in conversations that I've had with women, and Raven can address this. I mean, I've seen it that
men
women
don't do that, Kevin. Come on now. Men don't do that.
Okay. I'm just saying women are harder on women than men are harder on women.
That is also and I'm glad that you went first, so thank you for that. I'm gonna touch on what Kevin said, then I'm gonna try to answer the question. Kevin said that women are harder on women than men are, and it's because we have been taught to do that by men. Men are hard on women, end of. And so, because women have been conditioned to serve and to nurture and to placate the egos of men, we have then internalized those ideals and amplified it, multiplied it. Because if you're a religious man, so you understand this principle. Anything you give a woman, she will multiply. That is that is our function as women. So if you give me hardness with women and disrespect for women and forced subservience on women, we are going to take that and multiply that, and then we're going to look at one another and multiply that ideal and that mindset. So that's a direct child or result of patriarchy, Kevin. But to answer Nate's question, women do have certain things that I think that, and this is something that I've had to come to terms with myself as a woman. I do think that in certain instances when we are, and again, this I only say this because I believe in the concepts of men and women the way the Bible describes it. And so it's only because of my spiritual and religious beliefs that I believe what I believe when it comes to men and women. I believe that men and women, we are equals in the eyes of God, but we also have, as Kevin stated, very different functions in the eyes of God. And in that way, we are not the same. We're equal, but we're not the same. And I think that when you think about the things that are innately within women, which is our ability to empathize, which is our ability to nurture, which is our ability to see most of the time see emotion before we see logic. If not in a healthy way, those things can be detrimental to getting a thing done. If we are in a situation that requires us to be thinking logically, and I am meeting that with all of my feminine nurturing, my desire to nurture, my desire to empathize, my desire to do all these things that innately come to me as a woman, we're not going to get to the solution of this problem because I can't get past my emotions to deal with logic. And I'm not saying that's in every instance, but it does happen. It definitely happens. Like even in child rearing, when you are trying to raise a little boy, um, there are
Good
certain
morning,
things
Raven.
that I cannot teach I can't teach a man how to be a man. I just can't. I'm not going to take on that responsibility. I can only supplement what I think should be there. But when it comes to teaching a boy how to be a man, I can't do that because I'm not a man. And so it would be ludicrous for me to assume that I can teach a man how to be a man the best way possible. If in me, let's just say and I pray to God this ain't my life because I don't want it to be my life. But let's just say I become a single mom of a baby boy. I already know starting out that while I'm going to do everything in my power to supplement what is not there in a male father figure, and that might produce a very great man who will one day become a great family man and a great all-around man overall. I know that if there was a man there, a healthy man, a good man, a man who was great at leadership, if he was in that equation, that baby boy could have been a way better man than anything that I would have produced. That's just the reality of it. I think that when it's also why I've had to teach myself not to say things like when Father's Day comes around, I don't tell women Happy Father's Day because you're not that child's father, you're that child's mother. I can't we cannot remove the importance of male figures and then be like decide that we are better than that, because that's just not how things work. That's not how things work according to the God that I believe in. And so I can't make those assumptions. What I can say though is that women are amazing leaders when we are two things. Women are amazing leaders, end of. Women are amazing leaders when we are, focused on our individual purpose. And so that's why you have women who are amazing at things like innovation and technology and healthcare. There are women who are amazing at, very physical jobs like, fitness and policing. And there are women who are extremely intelligent and make the best doctors and the best lawyers and all these things because that is their purpose. But there are also women who are only great leaders because they did not have a choice but to be. I think that both of those things exist, which kind of plays to Kevin's argument that, we're all great at different things and we all should be, standing in the gap for one another. But at the end of the day, I do believe that if you have a man who embraces leadership and who truly wants to be a great leader, 9 times out of 10, I do believe that he would probably be best at that. Outside of a woman being fully in her purpose and what God has called her to, you're not gonna be better than her at that thing because that's what God called her to. That's different than being a great leader because I have to be, and that is what those women are referring to in that short clip from that podcast. They're not talking about being good at a job. They're talking about being good in the household. And if we're going to stay within that realm of argument, we're great leaders because we have to be sometimes, not because that's what we desire. And if we felt like we were better leaders in the household, end of, we would not require men to be in the household, period. We wouldn't even have that desire because what can I do with you? You're not a great leader. You're not going to contribute anything. You're not going to be effective in as far as leadership of this family. What do I need you for if you're not a great leader?
Absolutely.
That's one of the
That's the same
greatest
thing
lies
I
ever
said about
told.
no count.
And here's what I would agree with.
Count.
Yeah, here's what I would say on that is that I think that, Nathan, I agree with a lot of what Raven just said
I
there.
bet you do.
I think a lot of women want a man in their life to be that leader, to be the one who stands on business, to be the one who holds it down. Because I think on some level, and again, I hate getting into this because we get into sort of like these broad generalizations, right? I think a lot of what Raven says shows that every man is not the same, every woman's not the same, every situation is not the same. So what we do when we get into this argument is we start making broad generalizations about men and women that don't apply to everybody. So I'm going to say something that a lot of men or a lot of women going to be like, I don't agree with that. But
Yeah,
that's my personal experience. That's my personal experience. It does. It makes for a great debate like this. It does. But I think if we're trying to take anything from it, it's like, and move forward, it's like, I don't believe necessarily that there's anything like a natural born leader, right? I think we all learn either through experience, and usually that's from making the wrong decision and then learning what not to do the next time. Like none of us are 10 for 10 on making good decisions on everything that we do. Most of the time we become good leaders because we have made some bad choices, or we have the benefit of being up under people who are solid leaders that we learn from, or we find ourselves in some programs where they teach us leadership skills, decision making, that sort of thing. So I think more leaders are made than are actually natural born, quote unquote, so to speak, leaders. I think to Raven's point, and this is not true in a lot of cases, but unfortunately it is true in too many cases. I won't even say a lot of cases, but it's true in too many cases for Black women, because in some instances, again, and I hate saying this in broad generalizations because it's not true. There are a lot of really great Black men out there that are handling their business, leading their households. But a lot of times I don't hear that coming from Black women who come from that solid background where they have solid daddies in their house, or they got solid husbands who are with them having this type of conversation. Where I predominantly hear that from is women who have been in situations with bad men leadership, or who have abdicated their responsibility to lead their family or lead their relationship. Those are the women who have these types of conversations. Or women who are not in that situation and are independent sisters doing their own thing by themselves. But I think if you have been graced in a position where you've had solid men in your life who have been solid leaders, that gives you a whole different perspective on that situation.
I think that patriarchy is just like racism. It's a mofo, boy. It is a mofo. Patriarchy got us believing one of the greatest lies ever told, that women are more emotional than men. Now, when I was younger and had less life experience, I believed that. At this age, that ain't true. That is not true. Men are every bit as emotional, if not more emotional than women. It just comes out in a different way. We just call it a different name. And there are such a thing as natural born leaders. I agree with you, Kevin. I think most leaders are made, but there are some people.
Yeah.
There are some people who are natural born leaders from an early age. They just know how to talk to and influence other human beings. There are people like that. I've met 2 people in my life like that. Just seen it from an early age, just natural born leader of other people. And it was nothing they were taught.
So are these
And
contemporaries or people who are older than you?
contemporaries.
Okay.
Yeah, in both cases, younger than me, a few years younger than me. So yeah, absolutely. And I'll say it again. I mean, this is bigger than just running a household. You know, my point is in general across the board, right? If you're just looking at leadership, it's just my belief. Black women are by far the best leaders that I have seen in my experience for a variety of reasons. And at the top of that list is ego. Men and our ego has driven us over the cliff over and over and over again. Right now, we're dealing with the ego of the person in the White House. If you look through the annals of history, man, over and over again, it's been men and their bad decision making that have led other human beings down the wrong road over and over and over again. But again, that's just my personal opinion.
If I could make a quick
I don't have to be right.
recommendation.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Those of you who have sons, I don't care if they're teenagers or if they're grown up, or maybe even for us, there's a book by Brian Tome, who's the pastor at Crossroads Church. It's called The 5 Marks of a Man. And I went through that with my son. We kind of read it together. And I'm just going to tell you, it's a powerful book, very clear, a very powerful book. And I just think it would, for those of you who have sons, I'd urge you to.
What's it called again, Phil?
It's called The 5 Marks of a Man.
5 Marks of a Man.
It's by Brian Tome, Tome, and it's a great thing for a father and son to read together. I'll give you one comment he makes in there that really sticks with me. He says, I have known 15-year-old men and I have known 65-year-old boys. And I'll tell you, when you look, as you just mentioned, Nathan, at some of our political leaders today, I think that phrase has a lot of truth.
Yeah. One thing I would say, Nathan, that I would agree with you is if you look at let's just say how barbaric or violent our world is, I think you can attribute a lot of that to men. I would
1,000%.
I would submit that the world would probably be a lot more peaceful if women were in charge, because I think that one of the things I do agree with, and again, I think, this could be an American thing, so I can only talk about it, from the American societal perspective, because that's pretty much all that I am, and you kind of touched on this, is that men's emotional intelligence level is generally not as high as women's. And that is through no fault of our own, because it is how men are conditioned from the time that they're little boys. You fall down, you skin your knee, you start crying. The first thing that you're immediately told, usually by a male in your purview, and even sometimes by your mother, is dry it up. Men don't cry. And so we are taught at a young age to suppress all of the emotions that women can freely express, that they never have that put on them. And what winds up happening is all of the trauma, all of the pain that men experience, they're never allowed to express that in any kind of healthy way, which is most of the time grieving, crying, expressing that pain. We're taught to hold that in, and the way that it manifests itself is in anger and a lot of time in violence. And I see this all the time in young men that I talk to, that when you sit down and you talk to them and you get to the root of what their anger is, it's usually about some hurt that they were not allowed to resolve in a healthy way. And so they buried it in. And so they have this burning anger that's at the pit of their stomach, that what they're reacting to ain't even what they're reacting to. It's about something some pain or some trauma that they've experienced in their life that they've never been able to resolve. So I think a lot of the lack of emotional intelligence that men have or fail to develop, some of that empathy, some of that sympathy that women have, that we kind of turn cold to, is a product of how we've been socially conditioned, at least in this country, to deal with that. So I think that some of the violence and some of the expressions of that you see that come directly from men are a product of that.
Say it with me, everybody. Men are better leaders. I'm sorry, women are better.
Oh, you
Men are
say,
better
see, there
leaders.
it
You
is.
said it. You did it.
Is that
Men
a
are better
I'm
right?
like,
leaders.
wait
You
a
already know.
minute.
The truth
Wait a minute.
came
That ain't what
out.
you
I'm a
said.
barbarian. I didn't say I was perfect. I'm
See,
not
there
perfect.
you go with that. See,
I make mistakes too. I
you was
slip of
trying to
the
spit
tongue. My
that
bad.
woke line and you told on yourself. Get
No,
out.
I'm just imperfect.
I,
One of God's imperfect children.
I also want to say too that when we have these kind of discussions, I also think that it's important to, and I know that if we were having this conversation with Kevin Gordon, he would hate that I was about to say this, but race plays a factor in this because when it comes to gender politics and all that stuff, it has its place, but then you also have to think about how gender politics, outside of misogyny and feminism and all those things, how those things were also specifically used against us as a people. And so I can't help but notice that having that conversation was a group of black women and a few black men. And so there are levels that even come with that conversation outside of the complexities of patriarchy and all that stuff. There are levels that come with that conversation because we have also been conditioned to believe the worst about each other gender wise. We as black women, we have been conditioned, we've been taught, we've seen it in media how our men are emasculated and how they are removed of their power and removed of their ability to be great leaders. It's kind of been taught to us in certain ways and given to us in imagery, and so it's easy for us to cling to the idea that a man or specifically a black man is a terrible leader. Vice versa, black men typically have an issue seeing women as feminine, as soft, as being able to take direction and being able to be led. It's when I tell you, you go out here as a 30 something and you try to date, and as a black woman you try to have a conversation with a black man, and you just so happen to show how intelligent you are in that conversation, he immediately feels emasculated because what he's been conditioned to believe is that any woman with an opinion or any woman with a strong moral standing or anything like that, oh, she masculine. She want to be the man. She this and she that. No, sir. Actually, I truly believe in your ability to lead. And if you give me the chance, I'll do everything in my power to empower you to lead because that's what I want for myself. But because we've been fed images and messages about each other to each other that conflict with the other, it becomes a hard conversation to have when we're actually talking about what makes a good leader between the sexes, or if that's even worth the conversation to have, because we have been conditioned as a people to not believe in one another and not believe in the great things and the good attributes in one another. So it makes that conversation even more complex to have.
I think a man who has an issue with an intelligent woman, I think that says more about him than it does about the woman and whatever insecurities that he may not have about where he is at. I mean, look, here's where I knew there was a certain point in my life, even though I was doing well, that I knew I had to get my stuff together. When I met my wife and I looked at her and I said, you know what? She got more going on right now at this point in her life, and we're roughly the same age. She's maybe like a year older than I am, and I had to take a look at myself, and I had to say to myself, like, not that I was intimidated by her and her intelligence or what she had to accomplish. What it said to me was I had to get my stuff together because I had no excuse for where I was at that point in time in my life, just in terms of, being a bachelor and everything that goes with living that type of lifestyle, but not really having anything as building towards a future. And so what that did was, instead of me looking at her and saying, oh, she want to be in charge and be all of this, what it said to me was, I got to get my stuff together to get to a point where I have something to offer her, right? To say to her, like, you're not bringing everything to the table. Here's what I'm bringing to the table. And so I proceeded over the next couple of years to put myself on a plan to be the type of person who was worthy to be someone's husband. So rather than being intimidated by that, it just simply said to me, it made me recognize within myself what I needed to get straight.
I want to say, Mrs. Aldridge, you are a lucky lady because that's not what we getting out here. These young ladies who are trying to date and have a family, we're not getting that. What we're getting is a bunch of men who come in contact with a young lady like myself who has a lot going on. and it's intimidating. It's, oh, you trying to emasculate me. It's, oh, I got to get away from you, or even I got to knock you down a peg because I
I
don't
gotta
feel
say
confident in
something.
who
I
I
gotta say
am, and so
something
I
here.
have to make sure that you no longer feel confident in who you are either, so that we can be on an even playing field. I pray for the day a man comes across me and either feels more accomplished than me or realizes that I got more going on and says to himself, "Ooh, what can I contribute to what she got going on?" Because it don't seem to be out there right now.
Can I say something? I thought that Kevin. I thought that Mrs. Aldridge had the biblical quality of long suffering.
She does. She would tell you. She would
That's right.
absolutely tell you
Okay.
she
Okay.
does.
Interesting. All right, I got another topic. Again, this may not be on your radar screen. It's off the beaten path, but I'm interested in getting your thoughts. I came across this video. Now, in this video, you're going to see a man whose name is James Harrison. He's a former professional football player. He
I know
played
who that is.
for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He was a defensive players, one of the really good defensive players for his era. But he was recently on a podcast. He was on the Pivot podcast, and he was talking about an interaction he had with his son. I'm going to play this for you and then get your thoughts. Check this out.
You know, what's your body count? I'm like, do I tell him the truth? Do I lie to him? And I'm like, I'm afraid he might ask his mama. And I know she know the truth, so I can't lie to him.
Right.
I tell him. So he like, what? I'm like, yeah. Like, I was hurt in a bad way. Like, for a long time. I was raised a different way. Like, I wasn't raised, I was raised like you were raised, son. You got your Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I didn't have that then. We didn't go to church like that. I didn't understand the representation of all, I'm living by a whole different set of rules at that time, I didn't know. He say, yeah, I think.
So if you missed it, basically, his son asked him what his body count was. By body count, his son was asking him how many people did he have sexual intercourse with. And so it begs the question that I want to bring to the crew. So if your child asks you what your body count is, do you reveal that to your children? Should you reveal your body count to your children if they ask?
I will proudly tell my children my body count because it ain't that many, so I ain't got no worry about. Proudly.
So
I
if there
can
were
count them on
more,
one hand, baby. I can count them on one hand, and your daddy is on that same hand, so I ain't got nothing to worry about.
now what if it was triple that amount? Is there a number in which you might feel uncomfortable sharing, or how's that work for you?
I mean, again, because of the way I was raised, that ain't never been nothing that I've ever had to pontificate on, to be honest with you. But I do believe that there is, teaching moments within being honest with your children. I don't think that you should never live a life that you would be ashamed to tell your children about. And even if you did, that is still a teaching moment for your child. And so if it so happened to be that instead of my fingers worth on this one hand, it was triple that, I would still have that conversation with my child because I want them to understand that that's not something that I want for them necessarily. Like, I get being young and having fun and all that good stuff, but I do believe that it's because of that mindset being taken a step too far. While we do have a lot of the issues that we see in the world and specifically in our community today. So I think that if you're going to commit the sin, you're going to have to repent to God at some point, and your children are no greater or bigger than God. So if you're going to, at the end of the day, if you're going to have to answer to God about your decisions and your actions, you should have that same mindset when it comes to your children. Be prepared to explain your sins to your children.
Yeah. I'm gonna follow up on a comment that Nat Turner, he said, what kind of child asks his parent about a body count? That's something I never cared about. And I can feel Nat on that. But my dad was one of those types of people who always wanted to have the quote unquote birds and the bees conversation that I never really wanted to have with him, because at the age that I was, teenage years, that just wasn't something that I was interested in talking to my dad about. Because I never, for a long time, I never viewed my dad as a man separately from being my father. Like, I didn't look at him as as a man who was once a young man like me, who was doing the things that I was doing, and he was my dad. So in a weird way, he was kind of on this pedestal to where I didn't even want to think about him in certain ways, but he would try to have those conversations with me that as I get older now, I wish I had had the maturity to be able to have that type of conversation with my dad. Not that I necessarily would have wanted to know what his body count was, but to be able to have the depth of relationship with my father, where if that topic came up, we could have that kind of conversation with each other. Me and my father kind of had an awkward conversation where some things were safe ground to talk about, and other things I just didn't want to engage with him in conversation like that. That now, as a 50-year-old man, I wish I had that time back to be able to sit and have that conversation with him. So while it seems awkward and strange, I can appreciate that was Harrison, right? The ex-football player.
Correct.
Right there. Yeah, I can appreciate him being honest and being comfortable enough with his son to sort of have that type of conversation with him for all of the reasons that Raven said. Like those are teachable moments. They're moments that can kind of help you as a child begin to recognize that your parents are people just like you, that they jacked up just like you, that they make mistakes just like you. And I think in some ways it helps you understand them a little bit better, helps you sort through some of the emotions and questions that you have about your parents and things that don't make sense. And I also think it's a good thing for information to come from you, because trust me, I mean, the kid's going to come across the information. If you got a high body count, if you the mama or the father, you best believe that the mama and daddy of some of their kids' friends, if you living in the same town and they know you, they going to talk about, oh, yeah, so-and-so mama was this dad, or they daddy was, the player around it. And then the kids going to throw that up on the playground or whatever. And then you're going to be squabbing because somebody said your mom was this and your daddy was that. So I always say it's best if the information comes from the source versus secondhand.
I'll say this too, as a kid of somebody I'm a child of two people who I never had to ask the question, but I know for a fact that body count is in the stratosphere. Because between them, they got 9, 8 kids, and none of them share the same parents. I don't gotta ask them kind of questions. I know where I come from. So it's most definitely the truth. If you got the kind of parents who was just out here living life, your kids gonna find out eventually. No matter how hard you try to hide it, they're going to find out your business eventually. So it's best coming from you and being able to speak about your mistakes with context versus them just looking up one day and realizing, dang, I don't share no parents with none of my 9 siblings. My parents were some hoes. That's a very different kind of realization to come to.
Having a father in my life every day, and then I have 5 boys that I raised, like I'm active father. It's different. Like, I don't talk body count, but at a very young age, when my boys could smell themselves, we have the condom talk. My dad had the condom talk with me. My dad was very open about, I done been all over this world slanging, boy. You can't tell me nothing that I don't already know. We had these conversations. I have these conversations with my sons. At 12 years old, my last son, he goes a bowler, and I don't care. I'll say this. I said, you know how you won't get a girl pregnant? Fellatio. I talk to my sons this way because I want them to understand that they're responsible for children. So I'm not talking body count to my kids, but I am having those hard conversations with my boys because they know, they've seen firsthand how hard is to be a father, especially a father that's not, like they know. So James Harrison, he's a strange individual anyway, because I know that he's gotten into fights with my homeboy Levi Jones in Vegas and stuff like that, and then he's trying to fight Chad Johnson the other week on the Nightcap podcast. And I'm glad Chad Johnson stood up to him, because James Harrison, you're a dirty football player. Your son's a dirty football player, and your Pittsburgh Steelers. Hopefully, y'all lose going here forward. But
it's got personal.
Talk to your kids.
Yeah, personal.
talk to your kids about the birds and the bees, man.
Hey Phil, what do you think? Will you share your body count with your children?
Well, I'll tell you what I tell my kids. I tell them that I believe in what the Bible says, that sex should be kept to the marriage relationship, but I have not lived up to it. That's pretty much my
So you wouldn't
description
share any
about that.
details, and if not, why? Why would you be hesitant to share?
Well, details about my
Yeah, I mean, if
sexual
they ask you,
history.
"Hey,
What do you
Dad, how
mean?
many
With my
women or
kids or
people have
with
you
you
been with
guys?
sexually?" Would you tell them?
Well, actually, I'm not sure. I mean, it's not that there's that many, but it's like it's not one of those things. It's not one of those things you keep kind of a log of. So I just would simply tell them that I have not lived up to it. I mean, I
Phil,
don't know
your
what else I
cheeks
can
are as
say.
red as a cheap Christmas bulb, and
Well,
I'm
you're
loving
about
it.
to ask. I
I'm
mean,
loving it.
Let's
I
get
don't
down
want
to
my
brass
foot like
tacks. Phil,
shrimp
what is your
versus.
body count?
He's like, what is that?
Sexy Phil.
I said I
Sexy
don't know, and I mean
Phil.
that.
Sexy Phil is going to go up.
Wilt Chamberlain would blush. Wilt Chamberlain would
Let me
blush
just
if he
say
knew
this.
what Phil's body
Let
count
me
was.
say this. I will say this. Obviously, I'm not, shall we say, people don't confuse me very often with Tom Cruise, all right? But I will say this on my behalf. I would say after all these years, I have gotten to the point where I do know how to talk to women. Okay? I mean, I do.
Phil is a smooth
I do.
talker.
No. I mean,
He
I don't
puts
have
on the
that.
Herman
Obviously, I
Herman
don't
CD and he's
have
over.
a movie star. I don't have movie star looks or anything, but I do know how to talk. Actually, I could think I know how to talk to men and talk to them, but women, there's a certain way, and I don't
What's
know.
that
Phil
CD
said
you
he
put
can
on,
talk you out.
Phil?
Got a
That
few
Herman
things.
Herman? You put
Phil
on
said he
Herman
can talk
Herman?
you out your drawers if you
Pardon
want
me?
to.
You're back to
Yeah, you
Herman's
put on the
Hermits?
you put
What
on the
the
Herman
heck is
Herman
happening with
CD and
this?
they drop panties just come falling off.
Oh, no. Oh,
And
no.
that's
Oh, no.
why we call you
Oh, no,
Sexy
no.
Phil.
That is not the case.
This has been
That is not the case.
this whole show has been worth these last like 2 minutes, Phil. This is worth it for me.
Now we have a legitimate reason to call him Sexy Phil.
Yes, we do. You have earned and lived up to the moniker.
I didn't say how I did. I said I didn't remember how many. I didn't. That doesn't mean
I
that's a
think we
large
need to
number. I'm just
change.
saying
I
I
think we
don't
need to
really
change his
know.
nickname to Body Count.
Body count. That is too
Oh,
much fun. So, a lot of people said things I really agree with. So, like for me, the whole sex conversation is very, very serious. Like I look at myself as someone who's supposed to teach my children, and that means teaching them through my own life experiences. My daughter, she probably doesn't want to ask me about sex and intercourse because my stance from a very young age is if you ask me a question, you're gonna get an answer. And I'm gonna be graphic, I'm gonna be clinical, I'm gonna tell you all you need to know. So be careful. And she never asked me for a long time because she didn't want to hear what dad had to say. So, if she asked me what body count is, I tell her. If she asked me if I ever gotten an STD, I tell her. If she asked me if I had whatever happened, I'm gonna tell you because I look at my kids just like my wife. I'm here to be honest with you, right? I'm not ashamed of what I did because if I was, I wouldn't have did it. I did it. It is what it is. You can learn from it. And my attitude is gonna be the same with my son. And he might have the same attitude as my daughter, where he don't even want to ask dad a question because he knows dad's gonna take it all the way there. So that's just how I am. It's funny though, I have an album that's got like some old pictures of old girlfriends. And my daughter came across it many, many years ago, and she was like, "Who is that? That's not my mama." So it was me, I was prom king, but with the prom queen picture. And she was like, "Who is this woman?" And somebody said something earlier about how you can only see your parent with your other parent. And that's how my daughter was. She was like upset, like, "Who is this woman standing next to my daddy?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I mean, I was with people before your mother." She was like, "Huh? What you talking about? How's that? It's just funny how children are, right?" But it makes sense. She's only known me with her mom her entire life. So the thought of me being with another woman in any capacity is just like she ain't having it. And she's already told me if we get divorced, she will not accept any other woman in my life. So I'm gonna have to do what I do. So yeah, I mean, if my son asks me, my daughter asks me, I tell you. But as I tell them, be careful because you're gonna get all of it. I'm gonna give you the street colloquialisms, We're going to break out the Google. I'm going to tell you what this is. We're going to talk about orgasms. We're going to talk about the G. We're going to talk about all of it because I feel like that's what I'm supposed to do as a parent. And, we'll see how it goes.
Well, and it's better that it comes from you than it comes from
Absolutely
social media, YouTube, friends. Look, I mean, I got so much bad advice from friends and stuff that you thought that you knew that you didn't know.
Too
And
short.
it's like, I am thankful
Too
that
short.
I at least had a parent who tried to. My mom would never talk about this kind of stuff, but my dad had sayings. I'm not going to get into them here on this program. But he had a unique way of sex education and just some of the things that he would say and that he would try to get things, across. But I think especially these days, and I grew up, in a much different, you just didn't have as much exposed to you, in terms of pornography and all of the stuff that's out there now that's readily, at the hands of any kid if they got a cell phone. These days. So I think as a parent, if you want your child to make, good, smart decisions, you had better be the one relaying that information because there are a whole lot of bad sources out there that kids can get information about that's going to wind them up in some situations that, then as a parent or grandparent, you wind up cleaning up. So better that it comes from you.
I also think, and I don't mean to cut you off, Nate, but I also just want to say that, me jokingly talking about where I came from, and I came to certain realizations as an adult about what my parents were out here doing. But it was as an adult, and it was, my very religious upbringing in church that kind of kept me away from repeating that cycle. Because we never had conversations. And I've said this before. Me and my grandmother did not have no conversations about sex at all. When I was growing up, I kind of learned as I went, and so it was. I'll say this. She definitely instilled in me the fear of sex, which I don't necessarily know if that's a healthy thing. It's effective for escaping teenage pregnancy to instill the fear of sex into your teenage girl, but it does also tend to sometimes become a handicap. And when you are an adult and you are trying to navigate relationships, romantic relationships as an adult. And so I do think that it is better to have those conversations with your child as a parent instead of just completely not having the conversation at all, because it does lead to certain things that as an adult you have to learn how to overcome. There are certain things that it sounds silly, but well into my mid 20s, there were certain conceptions that I had about sex that I had to in real time realize for the first time that's not real, or that's not true, and now I look childish in the middle of us trying to have a moment of you know what I mean? Like now I look childish because I've had this preconceived notion of what this thing is or what it means or what it entails, and now I'm in real time having to figure out, oh, that's not what that is at all, or that's not what that means, or that's not what that entails at all. So I think that it is better to have the conversation about it, even the way that Nate described in them very explicit terms and them slang things and all that stuff. You got to have those conversations, because otherwise you're sending a young adult into the world with a informational handicap that's it don't always make for the best results. Like, I ain't got a huge body count, but I'm also still having to learn certain things in real time as a 30-some-year-old woman. Now I feel like I know as much as I need to know at 32, but at 20 something I surely didn't, and it definitely played a part in some of the ways that I handled some of my romantic relationships. So I just do believe that it is best that you had that conversation earlier rather than letting a child grow up and then have to figure it out in real time.
Yeah, my mother, listening to Raven, I was thinking my mother's form of sex education was Jesus is watching.
There's some gaps in that. Yeah,
that was her. That was the extent of her sexual education. Is Jesus is watching what you're doing.
Absolutely.
So I think that was designed to be more of a deterrent than anything.
And it didn't work, did it?
Nah, I guess I later joked about this. I probably shouldn't say this given my current situation, but I used to say, when my mother would say that, I would say, well, Jesus go get a show.
Oh, you putting on shows? Okay.
That was before my save days. Okay, I have to admit that. I can look back on that now and see how
Kevin out here
wrong
putting
that
on
response was, but that was my response.
You know what? I like you even more now, Kevin. I like you even more. Hey, listen, I'm looking at the time. We got a couple topics, but we're looking at the time. We'll push those on another show.
I
We'll
got
go
one
ahead
thing
and
to.
end.
I got one thing to.
Yeah, go ahead,
bring
Tarris.
to
Go
the
ahead,
table.
Tarris.
We're just now all getting to know each other, and I want to take this opportunity to admit a wrong that I was. I brought something to this platform about the NAACP where I went to the dinner and I didn't feel like I was appreciated as much because of the white guy got to speak and I had to sit down and watch. So fast forward to last Monday, I went to a similar situation. It was a public interest group that's supposed to be nonpartisan, but it was an all Republican-led thing. And the same white gentleman that got to speak at the NAACP was in this all Republican venue. And there's only two black people, two black Republicans, myself and another black Republican, all senators and elected officials, and another white guy who was at the NAACP that got to speak. And he was treated worse amongst his peers of white people than I was treated around the NAACP, because I was surrounded by AKAs and other people who were sisters who were surrounding me with love and support. So I just wanted to show you guys how, like, my character, and when I was wrong in my approach. I was wrong in what I expected when I went to the NAACP, because whenever the shoe was on the other foot and this gentleman was in, so to speak, out my zone, and it was a majority of white people. Although he was white, just because he was a Democrat, he was treated and ostracized worse than I was treated as a black Republican at the NAACP luncheon. So I want to apologize, and I want to show you guys the level of like character that I have. That I'm not some wrong and strong type of guy that's going to come on this platform and say something crazy or say something that I don't understand and say something and I'm not going to stand on it. If I'm wrong, I'm going to come back and I'm going to say, hey, I was wrong. In this situation, I was wrong. And I just want to apologize and leave it there.
No apologies needed on my side, man. But, thanks for sharing. Appreciate it. Does anybody want to share anything before we roll out?
Can I share one thing,
Absolutely.
Nathan, before
Anybody
we
want
get
to share
off?
anything before we roll out is what I was about to say, but go ahead, Phil.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought we were doing that. I know we don't talk about like foreign policy stuff much here, but I just got to tell you, there's Jesus in the Bible often said, Kevin, if I misquote this, let me know, but I believe he often said, don't be deceived. Do not be deceived. And I think everybody should be aware of what is happening today in the world. For 85 years, since World War II, our country has always stood with the other democracies in Western Europe against the dictators in Russia and wherever, okay? Everybody should understand that that is all now changing, okay? Trump is basically said to these European countries that have been our allies for 85 years, we're not interested in helping you anymore. In fact, Vance went to Germany and criticized them for not accepting the far-right neo-Nazi party they have there. But what we are seeing now is that the U.S. is now beginning an alignment with Russia, okay, against the democracies that we've been allies with for years. If you see what's happened or read what's happened, he and Putin, this is a guy, Putin, who has been responsible for the deaths close to 1 million people in that Ukraine war on both sides. He's responsible. And yet Trump is now saying, we got to be friendlier. We got to have more economic exchanges. And we're going to have a summit. You come to Washington, I'll come to Moscow. And, I read a powerful column today about comparing that to what happened in the 1940 when Neville Chamberlain, if you remember him, who signed this pact with Hitler, okay, where basically the deal was, okay, you can have Czechoslovakia, you just take it, but you're not going to bother us. That was it. And guess what? A year later, Hitler invaded Poland and World War II was on. And the writer, who's George Will, made the comparison of that with what is happening now with Ukraine, where basically they're being kicked to the side, and Russia and the U.S. are now going to make a deal. And I'm just saying everybody should be aware of what's happening, what is changing in this
Yeah, I
world.
No
think
more funding for Ukraine, man. They're just y'all. You go start talking about all the funding that they're not, the lack of funding they're going to get. Their water's cut off. You've heard Zelensky say it in the summit where JD Vance was at. He's like, U.S. is going to cut us off. He's going to cut us. They're going to cut us off. If you're still trying to cape for or get money for Zelensky and all that, something. Let's think America first, Phil. America first. Get out of
That
these
is America
wars.
first.
Yeah. Well, given that, Tarris, we probably should never have fought Germany in World War II. We should have just let Hitler do whatever he wanted. And, why rescue the people in the Holocaust? That's not
Yeah.
America first. So I guess you and I just
I
have
think
different
what people like Tarris and Republicans who argue this America first thing seem to forget about a lot of what we do as it relates to foreign policy is that is America first policy. It's spreading American influence around the world. It's keeping our enemies from filling in the vacuum around the world that we leave when we stop providing aid or when we stop defending our allies and allow dictators like Putin and China to just move in and take over areas. Yeah, it's going to be America first. It's going to be when they come and draft your children first to go to war, fight a war because we have neglected our obligations on the world stage. And what folks won't tell you is that the amount of money that America spends on that is a drop in the bucket versus the amount of money that they spend on other things. And they couch it as, well, if we weren't spending money over in Ukraine, that we could be solving homelessness here in America. Look, you could still keep spending what you're spending over in Ukraine and solve homelessness here in America, but they won't do it because they won't take money away from their rich friends like Elon Musk and all of these other folks whose corporate greed and all of that type of stuff is the root of a lot of the issues and challenges that we have. So if we could get the millionaires and billionaires in this country to pay their fair share of taxes, we could solve a whole lot of problems, continue to do what we're doing, cut down the national debt and a whole lot of other things. But we don't want to have that conversation in this country. It's easier to talk about cutting off the blank check, the quote unquote blank check that Ukraine has, and giving it over to Putin. The other thing that I would say about this is this has less to do with Ukraine and Putin than it is, like I say, everything that the Republicans go along with is a defense of and a capitulation to Donald Trump. It has zero to do with actually good public policy. It's only good public policy because Donald Trump says so, and because that's their guy, and they feel the need to defend him against any attack. It becomes defending a killer, a murderer, a dictator, an authoritarian like Vladimir Putin, and saying that the United States should be friends with that. Whereas for decades before that, the Republican Party's staunch position is that Russia is the enemy. Now suddenly, because Donald Trump says they ought to be buddies, that we're changing our foreign policy as it relates to that. So make no mistake, this isn't about any ideological agreement that Republicans have with this tract. It's all about being sycophantic, supporting Donald Trump, and defending his ideas, no matter how wacky, whether that's annexing Greenland, making Canada the 51st state, changing the Gulf of Mexico to Gulf of America, or turning Gaza into Gaza-Lago. Whatever crazy crap comes out of his mouth, these folks will justify it and defend it.
Yep,
You even got JD Vance going over to Munich, which I think Phil talked about, aligning himself with a Nazi sympathetic far right group in Germany and defending them. Come on, man.
He told Zelensky the water's cut off. He told Zelensky, he said, your water's cut off.
These MAGA folks, man. Kevin,
ridiculous.
you see it too, bro. I'm glad you said everything you said. I agree with you 1,000,000,000%. You are spot on. Nat is spot on. People just don't understand the benefits of diplomacy. People don't understand how USA aid helps to promote America's interest in other countries. And again, it's that male break everything, do as I say, and mentality is going to mess up this country. You know, pulling away from NATO is a terrible idea. Pulling out of Ukraine is a terrible idea that could lead to the exact same type of conflict that everybody doesn't want to see. But it goes back to the dumbing down of America, and it goes back to Fox News and Newsmax, where they're selling propaganda instead of breaking down, even attempting to break down these, in some cases, complex issues. So people don't even know what benefits us, quite honestly. They have no idea. And I've heard
Only
people make the same
Americans
point.
only Americans think that America is as great as we think it is. I think that that's why a lot of us don't understand the importance of diplomacy. When you go other places, they are sick of us. Like they can't stand our ass. And so if we don't have, procedures and processes for diplomacy, for spreading influence, for, when we decide that we want to meddle in other people's businesses and then providing some help or some aid or a reason for occupying a region somewhere outside of these Americas, you don't just take that away because America first and then not expect for some level of get back or some level of payback in that regard. We ain't that great. America not that great to nobody but us. And
What are they
so
gonna do?
once we understand that, once we get that understanding for ourselves as Americans, then we'll understand how important it is for us to be in other places and for us to be keeping our promises to other people internationally and globally. Without those allyships, we fall, we fail, we don't survive. And so it's just not a very smart tactic to remove ourselves and remove our support from these places that we have played an integral part in keeping together. We are in other places and we do the things that we do as a country internationally because we have to, not because we just want to, not because it's just an empathetic, compassionate need to do these things. A lot of stuff that we're doing is because we have to. It's because it's in our best interest to do so.
You know, a lot of
Yeah,
people
one
have
thing
this John Wayne idea about what makes America strong. What makes America strong is our alliances. It is our allies. If we back away, China, which has already made tremendous inroads going back to 2016 when Trump was there, they're making tremendous inroads in Africa. Around the globe, they're sitting back like, oh, you don't want to do it? We'll step in. If China takes our alliances, they will be the superpower. That's
yeah.
what's going to happen. That could be the end result of all this isolationist America first policies, is that China will assume the mantle of superpower in this globe. And I don't think any American really wants that. But it's the dumbing down of the information, the propaganda, to Kevin's point. The Republican Party has been reduced to a cult because they have no policy standard. If Donald Trump woke up from his nap today and say, you know what? We need to support Ukraine. Everybody in MAGA would jump on board. There is no principle. It's just whatever this man said. And it's dangerous.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. I mean, again, just kind of looking at it, America is the greatest power on the planet. One could argue maybe China is there. I don't think so. I mean, I think as far as military dominance, the United States is still the preeminent force. And let's face it, nobody has taken down the United States without this being a crash and burn scenario for everybody, right?
Nuclear
I mean,
Armageddon.
the fact that we're a nuclear power pretty much means that, okay, you can come at us if you want to, but all that means is that, we're all just going to blow each other to hell. And then, whoever is around will sort out, the mess. So I think as far as, I think this is more of an economic than sort of like a military threat, which is the way that the United States needs to be looking at it. Now, as always, I'm loath to try to agree with Donald Trump in any area, but if I do want to give him any credit in terms of what some of the things that he is trying to do, not necessarily pulling back or retreating, but I do think he has shown that there is more that Europe and the allies can be doing to pull their weight overseas and in some of these situations.
Europe has put more into Ukraine.
Sure, but
than the US
as
has.
they should. It is primarily a European issue in terms of Vladimir Putin. He's encroaching on European territory. So there's greater interest among our European allies than it is the United States. And that doesn't mean we have zero interest. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't have any involvement. But I do think that there is, what Trump is raising is that Europe can do more. He actually did get NATO to pay more of their fair share when he was in there the last time. So I do think, again, I'm not in favor of retreating. I'm not in favor of supporting our allies. But I think what he has shown and what he has proven is that there's more that our allies can do and that they can bring to the table that can reduce what's being asked of the United States. And I think that's a fair scenario to look at.
Yeah, I think you're being way more generous to him than is really necessary. I haven't looked under the
it's not about being generous. I mean, it's about what he's shown. I mean, he basically said
really?
Allies, you guys aren't paying your fair share. And guess what they came up? Guess what they came up with, Nathan? They came up with
again. I can't speak to the level of your knowledge, but something tells me that most of us don't really know all the details of what that really entails.
All I ain't giving the man
no credit whatsoever.
All I know is Trump said y'all can be paying more, and they started paying more.
Did they really?
So what that says to me is they had something in the tank that they could have been given that they weren't giving until he said to them, y'all need to do more.
Yeah, I'm not refuting what you're saying. I'm just saying that I would have to look at the numbers.
I'm no fan of the Donald, but I do say if we are going to, if our criticisms of him are going to have any credibility, you got to be willing to concede where he might be right in some places.
Well, who's paying more then? What country's paying more? How much more are they paying then, Kevin? That's what I'm saying. I've heard that out there.
I don't have the numbers at my hand.
I understand that. But what I'm saying is, if you're going to make a statement like that, then you need to have those numbers. Because
I'll have them on the next podcast.
Have them on the next podcast. Because to my knowledge, it's a pittance.
Anybody listening to the podcast can Google. I mean, we're not going to take 15 extra minutes in the pod for me to look it up and Google it right now. But
if you're going to make that point,
that question, the information is at your fingertips.
If you're going to make that point, then you should be able to say, well, X country is paying more money. So
if I were to say France is paying some more money, Nathan, then that would satisfy that question. I'm not going to sit up here. And falsely represent which countries that it is, because I can't remember off the top of my head. This has been way into his last term when this happened, so I can't remember what the reporting was back then.
Yeah. I've heard some of this
plugged in. Phil, am I saying anything that is incorrect?
Yeah. I mean, I've heard that too.
Yeah. Well, let's put it this way. I think the wording is important, because you see, Trump likes to describe it as if they're not giving enough money to Ukraine. That is not the issue. The issue is what percentage of your budget do you spend on defense?
Yes,
that's the issue. Okay, so let's not be confused by saying, and the way it works is in NATO it's a goal. Okay, they have a goal, but when he says they owe us money or they have, that's very nebulous. Okay, it's very nebulous, and sure, if all he said in his foreign policy change, all he said was, hey, they got to start paying more. I can live with that. But that's a lot different than lining up and aligning with Vladimir Putin. And you remember what he said in the campaign? He said if they didn't, as he says, pay their fair share, he'd tell Russia to go ahead and do it whatever they want. And you're right about my party. Can you imagine Ronald Reagan ever saying that?
Don't mistake what I'm saying. This is sometimes what happens in arguments. Is you take what I say about, hey, Trump might have been right here in terms of, and immediately equating that with pulling funding for Ukraine or supporting his support of Putin. That's not what I said. And I think it's a mistake to make those leaps to say, hey, Trump said these countries are not living up to their promise to spend this percentage of their GDP on NATO defense.
But I think the issue was more complicated.
He challenged them on that, and they increased that. Is that not a good thing?
All I'm saying is the issue is more complicated, right? This is more that Trump propaganda spin, right? He wants to oversimplify very complicated issues. I believe this issue is way more complicated than just that. And even if it isn't, so how much more are they spending? Is it 1% more, 2% more? Does it really make that much of a difference?
Well, it
I think
does.
it's probably a drop in the bucket.
Here's why it makes a difference, Nathan. It makes a difference because if they're not living up to their end of the bargain, who is picking up the slack? The United States is picking up the slack. And that was his argument, that because you're not living up to what you promised, we're having to pick up your slack.
I don't believe it at all. Not one bit.
Too easy.
Well,
I don't believe it at all.
Again, you can believe what you want to believe. What you believe doesn't make it fact. I mean, just because you don't want to believe it, that's no different than what you accuse the other side of doing.
And just because Donald Trump said it,
we got to graduate from kindergarten arguments to having adult conversations about what's
you're
really
making a
going on.
kindergarten argument, Kevin.
No, you're saying you don't want to believe it, but you don't have any. You just like you're challenging me.
You don't have any
facts to bring to bear and say why it's
you
false.
just made a point, and when I asked you to give me an example, you didn't have any.
Nathan, you know what? In fact, while we were talking about it, I just pulled it up. So if you want me to tell you the countries that increased their percentages, Poland. There's
how much?
Let's see. They were
It's not gonna be enough.
They were at less than 2%. Now they're at 4%.
Okay. And what other countries?
It's never gonna be good enough.
You can't do
It's
that,
never gonna be good enough.
This is why our political discourse is where it is.
You're exactly right, because you're trying to simplify very complicated issues,
if somebody
Kevin.
on the MAGA side did exactly what you just did, you would be all over them. If you hit somebody with MAGA with some facts and they was like, so what? You would be all over. Nate the Barbarian would have his club, his sword, and his shield out. And this is what I mean about
you can say that, but it would depend on what they're saying.
To real substantive debates on facts and the issues. And what you cannot do, just because I agree, just because I say Donald Trump may have had a point on one thing, don't mean that I'm a Trump supporter, that I think everything that
whoever said you were a Trump supporter, I never said that.
But it
means what I said.
That's sometimes how things get Kevin, that you can't say anything you can't say anything is accurate or a positive that he does, because nobody wants to give him that, because somehow or another, if you say that,
like I told you, I think you're being way too generous, and I think you're oversimplifying, just like Donald Trump did. I think the issue of European security is far more complex than 1 or 2 percentage points. And I don't think that you or me or most people have the knowledge and the insight to really speak about it. So I'm glad I pushed you to get the information on Poland. I'm glad you shared that. But I would have to look at it for myself to really ascertain as to whether I think there's something really there. That's all I'm saying. I think it's more difficult than that. I think it's more complicated. That's it.
See, you got me arguing. You got me arguing for Trump, which ain't even what I'm trying to do.
You opened that door. You opened that door. Nobody told you to open that door. But when you open that door,
I'm just saying, man, I try to look at things objectively.
You're not the only person that tries to look at things objectively, but
when I see, I gotta, my big thing on this program is hypocrisy. So when I see it, I'm gonna call it out. Whether that's for people who I think like or people who I don't think like, I gotta call it out. And and this is the problem that we have right now, is that every time we don't acknowledge our hypocrisy, it undercuts legitimate arguments that we have.
Oh, not to get into this, but last week, we don't have to rehash this. I said, I think we argued about it for about 20, 30 minutes. I said I agreed with getting rid of the education department, which is one of his primary things. All right. All right. So, I don't,
and you were dead wrong.
At least as far as I go, I don't think that's not the issue. Kevin's trying to say that, anything Trump, I'm against or you're against. I'm just pointing out that's one of his issues that he's doing, and I agree with it as far as getting rid of the education department. So I don't think I don't feel I should be labeled hypocrite in any way for, what
I didn't say you.
No, I said you were a hypocrite because of your opinion piece. That's what I said. Yeah, you were a hypocrite.
Now we're talking about different things. He just said, Kevin just, anyway, we don't need to
I wasn't speaking specifically to you when I made that statement, Phil.
Okay. All right. Okay. As long as you blame Nathan.
Yeah,
for
I mean,
everything,
I'm at a
I'm
point
fine.
when it comes to Donald Trump that until I verify for myself, I don't get a man no credit. He earned that. He's earned that.
But that's
Because
what I'm
he's
saying.
been nonstop lying, nonstop
Kevin,
spinning,
let him have the last
nonstop
word. We need to move
propaganda. And
on.
anytime he's in office, all the man does is lie. So
I mean,
forgive me if
these
I
are
want
coming
to trust
from
but verify.
these are coming
Forgive
from
me if I don't
independent
believe a
reports.
habitual liar. Forgive
These are
me if I
coming
don't
from
believe a
independent
habitual liar.
reports, though. These are coming from independent reports, not from the White House, not from the Trump administration. This is BBC. These are other mainstream news sources that, you know, we quote on this show a lot of times and use on this show.
Yeah.
So
And
that's
until I
all.
look at it, I don't believe it. That's all I'm saying.
Well, if you can't believe the BBC on that, then how can you believe the BBC that says anything in favor of what you argue for?
I mean,
So
you
if
can
the
put it that way.
BBC is lying about Trump and NATO defense,
So now
then
I'm
you
saying
can't take
BBC
any of
is
their
lying
reports.
about Trump. I never said that. I simply said that I have watched this man spin and lie for years. So forgive me if I don't trust him until I can verify or ascertain for myself. He has not earned the benefit of the doubt for me on anything. Now, I might do some research and come back and say, you know what? He was right. But until I do that, he don't get a pass. And that's his fault. That's his fault. I'm just saying for me. Now, you can believe it, but I'm just saying
Yeah,
me.
and also remember, Kevin, you guys remember this. Say what you want about Mussolini, but you know what they say, that he made the trains run on time. Okay, so
And
let's not
Hitler
forget
built a
that.
lot of bridges and roads too,
Again,
right?
making a point is not an overall endorsement of
Yeah, I didn't say it was.
one's whole agenda.
Yeah, I didn't say it was. I just said you were being too generous, in my opinion. That's all I was saying. So, hey, listen, I appreciate everybody. Thank you so much for your time today. Have an excellent rest of your week. Raven, you got something going on this week you want to let people know about?
I do actually. So, in a couple days, on the 20th, I will be at the Woodlawn Recreation Center. First of all, they are having. I'm partnering with the Frederick Douglass Foundation of Ohio. They are having a Black Wall Street Marketplace and Expo at the Woodlawn Recreation Center. And it's going to be a wonderful event. It'll start at 3 p.m. and then there will be a panel discussion that takes place with Dr. Umar Johnson that will happen at 6 p.m.
I'm gonna bring my white girl. I'll bring a white girl
Oh
with me.
God. Oh God. Okay, and I promise you they're gonna be in there screaming Black women forever and snow bunnies never. So be careful. But
I'm just playing. I won't do that. I won't do that.
but yes, that'll be this coming Thursday. Like I said, the expo starts at 3 p.m., but the panel discussion starts at 6. They are asking that if you have, because the tickets are sold out on Eventbrite. So if you do want to come, they're asking that you come to the expo and sign the wait list. Just in case we have some ticket holders who don't attend the event, they'll be making those seats available to others. And there's also an overflow room as well, I believe. So if you want to try it at getting into the panel, you are advised to come to the expo that starts at 3 p.m. But again, that is the Woodlawn Recreation Center on February 20th, which is this coming Thursday.
Thursday, 3 o'clock, Woodlawn Recreation Center. And you're the moderator, is that correct?
Yeah, so I'll be on one of the panels. I think that Sister V, Victoria Strong, is the moderator,
Okay,
but I'll
Sister
be
V.
on the panel discussion. Yes.
All right, cool.
Way to
cool,
go.
cool.
Way to
Good
go, guys.
stuff.
That's
All
awesome.
right, listen, everybody. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you. To the crew, thank you for your time, and have a great day, everybody. We'll be back with you again on Friday. Yep, take it easy.